The city stank of tallow smoke, old wine, and the sour breath of 1,000 anxious mouths. Wind from the Blackwater crept up the hill in thin fingers to tease the pennons that hung slack above the red keep, but it could not scour the heat that clung to the stones. Eddard Stark stood by his shuttered window in the Tower of the Hand with Robert's letter in his hand and the last of the day bleeding out over the bay, and he weighed a choice that would break him no matter which way it fell. The wax was cracked already where he had broken it, stag impressed upon the seal like a beast trapped in ice. They had written the words together when the king had still been breathing and roaring, between the fits of pain that made him small. Now the king was fading, each breath thinner. "To be my hand is to be the king," Robert had joked once. There was no laughter in it now. "Lord Stark," said the boy at the door, hoarse with fear. "Lord Renly is here. He says it is urgent." Ned closed his eyes a heartbeat and knew he had no more time to think. He folded the letter and slid it into the leather of his doublet where he could feel its weight against his heart like a brand. "Admit him." Renly entered without his guards, though steel whispered just outside in the corridor like a warning. The youngest Baratheon wore green and gold in the Tyrell fashion, the rose pinned like a joke over his breast. He looked every inch the handsomest man in the city until he smiled. Then he looked like a boy again, clever and a little cruel. "Your Grace," Renly said, and let the words hang in the air, sweet as a plum. "I am not king," Ned said. He felt the lie scrape his tongue. "Robert still lives. He lives as a wineskin lives when you have poured out the last cup," Renly said. "You know this. You know what they will do when he is gone. Cersei will move tonight or in the morning. It makes no matter which. You have the letter?" Ned touched the leather. "I have it. Good. Then we will have the boy." Renly came closer, his scent garden light and his eyes bright with the sort of excitement that men mistake for courage. "I have men, my own household guard and 50 more besides. They are quiet men and gold has rinsed their tongues. We go now before the moon is full up. We take the boy and the queen into custody. When Robert dies, we show the realm his word, and you rule as protector with the boy as your puppet until—" Ned shook his head. "Joffrey is no son of Robert." The words came out softly, almost a prayer. "I have read too many bookish records to be sure of anything else. He is hers, not his. Robert's heir is Stannis." Renly's mouth tightened. "You cannot put Stannis on a throne. He will take it like a clenched fist takes a thorn. No smiles, no song, no bread unless he has counted every loaf. The realm will not have him, and if you do not take him by the hand, he will take your head. He has already sent for his ships. He watches Dragonstone like a dour owl and waits for us to blink. You want peace? The realm needs a king who can be loved or at least born." He stepped nearer still, voice dropping. "You have daughters. You have a name people trust. Take it. Take it now. If you do not, no man will. The Lannisters will be on the throne by sunrise, and there will be heads on spikes by sunset." Ned looked at the table and saw the map of Westeros drawn by some scribe with a fox's eye and a crabbed hand. The north broad and pale as frost, the riverlands like veins, the green reach, the storm-torn coast where storm's end crouched, the westerlands gold-veined and dangerous, King's Landing a little crown stamped on parchment. He thought of Catelyn in Riverrun, of Robb with his wolf's pride and boy's face, of Bran and Rickon beneath the old god's leaves, of Jon upon the wall among cold stones and colder shadows. He thought of Sansa, who believed in songs, and Arya, who believed in steel. He thought of Robert dead already in all but name, and of a golden queen whose smiles were knives. "Your deal is this," he said at last. "We go now. We take the queen and her children into safe custody. In the morning, we summon the small council and the high septon. We read Robert's letter. We put an end to the lie. Then, for the sake of the realm, for the safety of my children and yours, I will." He felt the taste of ash in his mouth. "Take the crown." Renly let his breath out as if he had been holding it for years. "At last," he said, and the boy vanished. The man stood in his place. "I will stand with you. The Tyrell fleet will feed the city with grain and oaths. and my sister will bring her father to heal. We must move." Ned nodded, and the decision settled into him like cold iron. He turned to the door and called for his household men. Tomard, Jax, Desmond, and Harwin came, tall shadows with North in their faces. They tightened sword belts, checked dirks, did not look at him to ask what this meant. He told them anyway because he was their lord. "We are going to take the queen," he said. "We are going to take the king's children. We will use no more steel than we must. We do not kill if we can help it. Remember this. The realm watches." They moved as one into the corridor where shadows gripped the torches and shook them so that flame crawled like something wounded on straw. Loras Tyrell was there with Renly's men, a bright boy in plate with the sunflower shine to him. His visor was up and his face was very still, a knight's painted mask of youth. "Lord Stark," he said, "we have the posts at Maegor's Holdfast and at the King's Gate. The Watch Commander sends his respects." "Respects are not worth steel," Renly murmured as they went, but he looked pleased. Varys floated out of some dark place with slippered steps, his hands folded in his sleeves like a praying maiden. "My lords," he said. "Such a late walk. How wholesome. Go back to your spiders," Renly said, not bothering to soften the insult. "Or stay out of our webs." "I am sure I do not know what you mean," Varys said, and smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. "The queen is Abed. The boy is with his hound." "You know everything," Ned said. "If you know of a trap, say it now." Varys spread his soft hands. "Oh, I know very little, my lord. I know that the hound is loyal to the boy and to his own appetites, and that Ser Meryn is loyal to himself, and that Ser Boros is loyal to whoever has last reminded him that life can be long. I know Lord Baelish has a finger in every pot that smells of profit. His kitchen is never cold. And I know that Ser Barristan Selmy is loyal to oaths few men remember to keep. Do not make him your enemy." Something real moved in the eunuch's tone then, a wire under silk. "Please." Ned met the pale eyes and saw there a kind of sincerity he trusted because he did not understand it. "No blood if we can help it," he said again, as much to himself as to the others. "Come." The Red Keep's heart was a maze that had swallowed kings and spit out bones. They moved through it like a spear, Renly's men long trained to the dance of corridors. Tomard and Harwin at Ned's back like winter following hard on autumn. When they reached Maegor's Holdfast, the iron portcullis was down and white cloaks glimmered behind the teeth. "Open," said Renly, his voice bright. "In the king's name, Lord Stark bears his warrant." The Kingsguard commander here was Ser Boros Blunt, jowls heavy beneath his helm. He peered as if his eyes were small beer. "Lord Stark," he said, and his tongue turned the words to mush. "It's late." "Open," Ned said, showing the stag seal in the candlelight. "The king commands it. There is to be no entry or exit from the queen's apartments save by my order." Boros looked from Ned's face to the wax, as if wax could lie as easily as men. "And if I say no?" "You will be relieved," Renly said, almost kindly, "and you will be found unfit for your white cloak and sent to guard doors for innkeepers. Open the gate, sir. This is the king's business." There was movement in the shadows beyond. Ser Meryn Trant's thin mouth and tired eyes, and behind him the heavy bulk of Sandor Clegane, burned half-faced dim under the torches. The hound rested a hand on the great sword at his hip, amused as a cat before a rooster. "This is folly," the hound said, and his voice was dry as old leather. "But I do love a late-night stroll." Ned stepped forward, past Renly and the bright young knight. He did not touch his sword. "Sandor," he said, using the name as if it were a rope thrown to a man half-drowned. "We mean to take the boy and his mother into custody, for their safety and the realm's. I will not have them mishandled. Keep your sword sheathed and you can walk beside me." The hound's eyes flicked to Renly and then to Loras, whose gaudy armor shone like a dare. A low chuckle rattled out of him. "I'll sheath my sword, Stark, and walk beside you," he said. "But I'll put my body between the boy and every man in this hall if you so much as look at him sideways." "Good," Ned said. "Open the gate." They opened it then, because the weight of 100 men is heavy even when they move on soft feet and whisper. The portcullis groaned up, and steel hissed as it was drawn, then sheathed again in the same breath when men saw how many others watched them. Ned went through, Renly at his shoulder, Loras behind with the white cloaks and the hound. They found Cersei in her bedchamber with hair unbound like a river of torn gold down her shoulders. She had not undressed. She had always known. Her lips were painted the same red as a fresh wound. She did not rise when they entered. She watched them all with a gaze so focused Ned felt it cut. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked, as if this were a mummer's show in poor taste. Ned took Robert's letter from his breast. He heard Renly's men shifting in the doorway, heard the tremor of the city in the stones, heard his own voice steady. "By order of King Robert Baratheon, I am named protector of the realm until his son comes of age. There is question as to the boy's legitimacy." He saw the flicker in her eyes and did not let it hearten him. "Until the council renders judgment with the High Septon's blessing, you and your children are to be kept in safe custody." Safe custody. Cersei tasted the words. Like a jewel in a coffer? Or a bird in a pretty little cage? She smiled then, slow and cruel. "You will not touch me, Stark. If you harm a hair on my son's head, my father will." "Do nothing," Renly said, and there was a light in him that was not gentleness. "Not tonight." She looked at Renly then, a long look that measured him and found him wanting in all the ways she could not imagine. "You," she said almost idly, "the pretty stag with no antlers." The door to the inner chamber banged open. Joffrey came out in his sleeping tunic, hair like a lion cub's mane, mouth already twisted with contempt. The hound appeared with him and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder that looked almost tender until you saw the pressure in it. "What is this?" Joffrey demanded. "Mother, why are these men here?" "Dog, cut their heads off. I am the king." "You are not," Ned said, and for a moment sorrow bloomed in him, soft as the endless northern snows. "Not tonight. Not until the realm is satisfied you have a right. You will come with me and be safe." "I'll do nothing you say," Joffrey spat. "Trant, Boros, kill them." Ser Meryn glanced at the hound. Boros glanced at the floor, frowning. Loras stepped forward with sword not yet drawn, his youth a mirror for the boys. "Your Grace," he said, and his tone gentled the title. "No one means to hurt you." "Come peaceably." "It will be roses and feasts soon enough." Joffrey's lip curled. "Do you think to command me, Tyrell? My grandfather will hang your lord father." "Your grandfather will do as politics advise him," Renly said, soft as silk, sharp as a razor. "Tonight he will do nothing at all." "Come nephew." "Let men who love you keep you safe." The boy jerked his shoulder away from Sandor's hand and, for a heartbeat, looked like a child. Then pride took him like fever takes a man. He drew back his hand to slap Loras across his smiling mouth, but the hound caught the wrist and held it without effort. He said nothing. He looked at Ned.
Ned nodded.
"We are done here." He looked to Cersei. "You will dress. We go now." "I will not be paraded," she said. But she stood and called for her woman, and her pride dressed her with every lace drawn cruelly tight. Sansa would have found the gown lovely and the work fine as spider silk. Arya would have torn at the stays with a knife. Ned stood and watched and thought of every woman in his life who had ever had to walk beside men with iron at their backs. They moved through the corridors like a storm, slow and inexorable, lightning held in scabbards. Varys walked with them a while, then vanished. Men of the watch peeled open doors. Renly's men spilled quietly into the lower halls to hold what they had taken. When they reached the Tower of the Hand again, Ned left the Queen and her children in the solar under guard. He thought of chaining them and did not. He gave them bread and milk as if they were guests. "Mercy does not buy loyalty," Renly said in his ear. "It buys me the ability to sleep," Ned said back. He sent for Barristan Selmy. The old knight came with his helm beneath his arm and his hair like pale wire where it showed above his collar. He looked at the Queen, at the boy, at the letter in Ned's hand, and then at Ned. "My lord, Ser Barristan," Ned said. "By the king's own seal, I am named protector until such time as the rightful line is plain to the realm. I will hold to that duty. You will too." Ser Barristan's face could have been carved from old oak. "I have served 3 kings," he said. "I served Ares until it was treason to serve him any longer. I served Robert when it was treason to the man I was sworn to. I will serve the realm. If you swear that no harm will come to the queen's children while they are in your care, then I will stand by the law as you speak it until the realm decides otherwise." "No harm," Ned said. The words bound him like chains. "On my honor," Barristan bowed. When he straightened, something had eased in his shoulders, or perhaps Ned only imagined it because he needed to. "Then I am yours." Sometime near dawn, the bells began to toll from the great September of Baylor. They pulsed the air like the heartbeat of a giant. The entire city seemed to stop to listen, as if you could hear death move in them. 1, 2, 3, a dozen, a score, beyond count. Ned stood at his window and watched a gull veer over the river, bright in the new light, and he felt the shape of what he must do cut itself into him. By the hour of prayer, he had summoned the small council and the high septon to the Red Keep. Renly sat with Loras at his back and a string of reachmen behind. Varys perched like a cat of 9 lives. Littlefinger came in late with a smile and his harper's fingers steepled as if in prayer. Pycelle wept into his fine beard, more from habit than heart. The great robed boulder of the high septon moved into the chamber with slow sanctity and smelled faintly of incense and old sweat. They read Robert's letter aloud so that the air might hold it and betray no one later. The stag seal shone in the candlelight like a joke that had turned to truth. Ned let the words be a shield and a sword both, and when they were done, he stood. "By this letter, I am protector of the realm," he said. "By blood and law, the boy Joffrey has no claim to the Iron Throne. The queen and her children are in safe custody. Ser Barristan Selmy commands the Kingsguard. The city watch holds the gates and walls. The grain ships from the Reach will be made welcome. We will hold fast until the realm speaks." "The realm?" Littlefinger's mouth twisted in amusement. "And how does the realm speak, my lord? With ravens? With swords? With the voice of the high septon?" He smiled at the massive shape in white. "Or perhaps with the voice of my lord Renly. All these voices sound very like power." "This is not a mummer's farce," Renly said softly, though a little light danced in his green eyes. "We cannot leave the throne empty. Stannis will seize it. He will come with fire in his hand and law in his mouth, and the small folk will starve while he counts pennies. My brother Robert is dead. A stag must follow him. The realm expects it." He stood then, all summer and banners. "I will be king with Lord Stark as my hand. The Tyrells will stand behind me. We will feed the city. We will keep peace." "No," Ned Stark said, and his own voice surprised him by how calm it was. "No, my lord. The realm does not need a third Baratheon king who thinks the crown his by right of charm or elder birth. The realm needs peace. It needs trust." He looked at the high septon, at Selmy, at men who had bent their heads to too many waves. "I will not set Stannis on this throne. He is lawful and he is iron, but he is not the king the realm will bear. I will not set Renly. He is bright and he is soft. I will not set Joffrey. He is neither. There is a different road." He felt the weight of Catelyn's gaze upon him from miles away, the weight of his father's bones, the cold of the gods' wood at Winterfell on his skin. He looked at Robert's empty chair and wanted to turn away from it, but he did not. "I will take the crown," Ned Stark said. "I will wear it until the realm is sound again and the Lannisters' treason is answered and the kingship can be given back to law, and then I will put it down." It was the only truth he had left that he could make into something like honor. Silence took the room for a heartbeat long enough to be a life. Then sound crashed around him like surf. Varys made a small squeak and then turned it into a cough. Pycelle dabbed at his eyes as if grief over Robert could be stretched into this new theater. Littlefinger watched him with that perfect mild interest that might mean anything at all. Renly was smiling, but not with his eyes. The high septon raised 2 padded hands. and the murmur broke upon them like waves upon a rock. "If this is to be your path, my son," he said to Ned, and there was an edge of fear in the piety, "you must take it before the eyes of gods and men." Ned inclined his head. "Then bring me before them." They went to the Great September in a procession that was part funeral, part wedding, part surrender. The bells had fallen silent. The air trembled with the memory of them. People massed in the streets like wheat under wind, craning, calling out names, holding up children as if holy men were passing. It took 100 men to hold the press back from the steps. Loras rode ahead with the hound at his side like fire and shadow. Ser Barristan came behind Ned with his white cloak spread like snow on stone. Renly was resplendent and at ease, the sun made flesh. Inside, light stabbed through 7 walls of glass and threw colors upon the floor. The High Septon stood before the altar like a mountain set by a child's hand upon a table. The space smelled of hot wax and old breath. Cersei did not come to watch. Joffrey did not. They were under guard in the Tower of the Hand, and the hound had gone back to sit by the door and grin at anyone who looked at him. Ned went down on his knees. He had never felt so far from the gods. He thought of the heart tree at Winterfell and the faces cut in old wood, and he knew the southern gods did not hear him. But old gods had never cared for crowns either, and perhaps that made them safer. When he rose, the false summer crown of spun gold and deep yellow garnets waited on a velvet cushion. Renly's eyes rested on it too long. Ned did not reach for it. "I will wear iron," he said, "not gold." It was a small thing and foolish. There were no iron crowns in King's Landing. The High Septon hesitated, and then, because ceremony must go forward, lifted the golden circlet and set it upon his dark hair. It felt lighter than the wolf skin he had worn on 100 hunts and heavier than a full hauberk. "Rise, Eddard of House Stark," the High Septon intoned. "Rise, King of the Undulls and the Royner and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm." Voices crashed above him like storm. Ned rose. He felt nothing but a great stillness in his chest and a great noise around it, and, somewhere very far away, the north like a wound he kept touching with his mind. Afterward, Littlefinger came to him in a quiet colonnade where ivy gripped stone, and spoke in the way that made every word sound like a joke at your expense. "A bold choice," he said, tugging at the petal of a flower as if to see if it would bleed. "You were not made for crowns. You were made for fur cloaks and a quiet wife in frost. But then, kings are often made in forges that crack their metal." Ned did not smile. "You will serve, Peter. You have served too many masters to stop now. I will have your skill with numbers and your knowledge of the city. But if you seek to play me false, I will know it, and you will regret it." Littlefinger inclined his head, an acknowledgement of a rule in a game where he did not accept any. "Oh, I think you will find me most loyal. I have always been loyal to myself, and to opportunity." He glanced toward the sea. "A fleet sails already from Dragonstone, I hear." "Then the work begins," Ned said. "It began with ravens, with oaths, with provisions, with the shoring up of walls and men. It began with a war." At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister read the first raven and did not move at all, as if the words were a wasp that would sting more keenly if he flinched. Jaime laughed when he heard, loud and bright as a boy on a summer day, and flicked the letter with a finger. "Stark," he said, "a king made from snow will melt in the first red rain." Tywin's eyes were yellow as a lion's under the heavy lids. "Stark has the queen," he said. "Stark has the boy. Stark has the city." He looked to the map. He never smiled. "We will take the Riverlands to soften his belly and see which of his allies has the stomach for hunger. Send the mountain west. Send men to burn the Mummers' Ford and pull down the herons' nests. And send a letter to the Eyrie. The Arryn woman must be reminded where her son's bread is buttered." He thought a moment, then added, "Tell Ser Kevin to call the banners. I will ride." At Dragonstone, Stannis stood in a wind that smelled of salt and old ash and did not shiver. His jaw was set in the way that made lesser men rub their own to be certain they had won. Melisandre stood beside him with her red hair unbound. and the fires that had burned all night long in the great braziers cast their heat upon her face until she looked carved from flame. "They have made the wrong man king," Davos Seaworth said, soft as tide. The wind tugged at his gray hair and the salt bit his eyes. "They will pay for it in blood, but the tally will be on your soul if you do not count every life now before you take it." "My soul is iron," Stannis said without turning. "Iron breaks." He looked at the Red Woman. "You say the Lord of Light chooses kings. I say he chooses instruments," Melisandre said, smile faint as smoke. "But I say also, look how the false gods have gorged themselves on the blood of men who thought justice could be hammered into a different shape than truth. The man in King's Landing sets himself above law. The fire is displeased." "I am displeased," Stannis said. "That is enough." He sent letters to every lord who had once smiled at him and looked through him, to every man who preferred Robert's laughter to his own silence. He sent Davos to Storm's End under cover of smoke to whisper in garrison ears. He sent his captains to count ships, and the Red Woman to count shadows. In the Reach, Mace Tyrell feasted and hesitated. He was a big man with small dreams that he thought large. Renly came to Bitterbridge with 100 banners and a laugh for every lord. He kissed Marjorie upon the brow and promised her a queen's roses. He kissed his mother's hand and promised her a king's manners. He bowed to his father as if respect cost him nothing. He took bread with Randall Tarley and wine with Leighton Hightower and broke a boar's spine at a single blow at a hunt to make the men roar. He spoke of King Eddard with a measured warmth that was oil upon the waters. "Let the wolf sit on the chair," he said to Mace in private. "For a season, let him be the broom that sweeps out the lions. He will tire because honor is heavy, and then the realm will want light things and feast days again. I will be there, but until then, Marjorie brings bread to the city, and the wolf calls her our fairest ally." Mace nodded and chewed and thought he had thought of it first. The Reach's grain ships set sail for King's Landing with banners sewn on their masts and bowstrings set under their decks, just in case. In the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister walked her gilded cage like a lioness in some Essosi menagerie. She did not rage in public. She did not beg. She saved both for when no one was watching. To Joffrey, she whispered poison. How the North was a place without songs. How wolves could not be kept. How the boy would one day be king if he was only patient and cruel. "We are in a story they think they are writing," she told him, holding his face between her hands and making him look at her. "But the end is ours. Remember your grandfather. Remember your uncle. Remember your mother. Smile for the guards and plan for the day we slip the leash and make them bleed." Joffrey smiled, and if there was fear under it, he did not know how to name it. Sansa Stark visited them sometimes, eyes wide as river stones, lips bitten to blood when she went back to her own chamber. She did not know how to stop loving the idea of a golden prince, even when the prince hissed at her like a cat in pain. She took her hurt into her needlework and made her stitches perfect. Arya visited too, once, with dirt under her nails and Sirio's voice in her head like a drum. She looked at Joffrey with a gaze so level the boy looked away. She looked at Cersei with a wild wolf's regard and said nothing at all. "Little monsters," Cersei said when Arya had gone, and there was something aching in it that surprised even her. In the Tower of the Hand, Syrio Farrell taught Arya how to see with both eyes and the spaces between. "There is a change in the world," he said in his water dancer's voice. "When kings change, the streets change. You must be a fish that swims without touching the nets." Arya thought of nets and of names. She thought of the dance of corridors and how her father moved like a storm but did not strike unless he must. She wanted to strike all the time and had to settle for learning where a man's eyes went when you fainted high. Ned worked until his hands trembled when he lifted a cup, and then he worked more. He sat with Ser Barristan and wrote orders to the watch to be drilled and fed, to the guilds to keep bread and salt flowing, to the ships to keep the river clear. He wrote to Robb, to Catelyn, to his bannermen, to lords he had never met. He sent a raven to the Eyrie and received a falcon back. Lisa's words flapping, panicked, refusing everything but the safety of her son. He read them once and fed them to the fire. He spoke with Renly beneath an orange tree in the gardens while bees went about their innocent wars. Mace Tyrell will send grain, Renly said. Perhaps even ships, if he can be made to imagine he thought of it. He will send men too, but he will insist upon places at table for all of them. He is a man you must praise to move. I can praise men, Ned said. I cannot lie about them. Renly's smile tilted. Then praise him for the right things. He is fat, but he is not a fool. He is slow but steady. You have need of steady. I have need of everything, Ned said, and looked up through leaves to sky so blue it hurt. Tyrion Lannister, freed from the Eyrie by a Sellsword sword and the caprice of a mad boy and a desperate woman, rode to his father's war host half pale with exhaustion and half bright with fury. He found Tywin's camp at the mouth of a burned village and found his father working by candlelight over records of grain and men like a steward. The stink of cooked horseflesh rose from a pit beyond the tent. Some men would eat anything after a sack. They have crowned the Stark, Tywin said, not looking up from ink that he placed as carefully as any knight placed a blade. You will take your hill men and ride to the crossroads. You will make trouble. You are good at that. I am good at many things, Tyrion said, and poured himself wine without asking, because it was the only brave thing he could afford. It is nice to be appreciated for one. Do you mean to take the city by winter? Or will we starve them and listen for the sound of their bones? Tywin's eyes flicked up. We will make him show his hand. We will stretch him. We will see who he trusts, and then we will break those men first. He returned to his lists. Write a letter to the phrase. Offer them anything. They will ask for too much. We will pretend to give it and then give less. Robb Stark received his father's raven in the great hall at Winterfell, the hearths glowing, the snow still months away but promised in the taste of evening. He read the words twice, 3 times, then looked to Great John Umber and to Maester Luwin and to his mother's chair, empty because she was in Riverrun sitting at her father's bed. Grey Wind rested his head upon Robb's knee and growled low when the boy's hand tightened in his fur. He is king, Robb said, half amazed and half afraid, tasting the word like a new wine. My father is king. Then the North is the king's, Great John boomed, and laughed until he coughed. About time wolves howled over lions. Will he call the banners? He asks for patience, Luwin said, reading over his shoulder, wise gray eyes flicking. He asks that we keep the peace and harvest early and send grain downriver if we can. He says there will be war, but perhaps not here if he can help it. Great John snorted. There will be war here if lions come sniffing. I'll stack their skulls for a winter wall. Robb smiled despite himself. His hands stopped shaking. We will prepare, he said, but we will not run south without a call. Father needs time. We will give it to him. Catelyn Stark heard of her husband's crown in the chamber where Hoster Tully breathed like a wind-blown curtain. She felt the words strike her, staggered, and then she stood very straight, because if she fell there would be no one to hold her father's hand and tell him that he had done well. She left the room and went into the Godswood of Riverrun where the heart tree wore no face and the water moved in slow loops, and she knelt and spoke aloud to gods she was not sure were listening. Give him cunning, she said. He has honor enough. Give him what he does not have, and I will pay any price. The price began to be counted at Mummer's Ford and the Burning September and the fords of the Trident. Lannister raiders rode like sickness through villages with names no map bothered to keep. Men who had never seen a lion saw gold on armor and red on cloaks and learned that such colors mean hunger. Beric Dondarrion rode against them with a ragged banner and the sort of bravery that eats men from the inside out if you do not feed it victories. He wrote to the king twice and received twice what help could be spared and no more. He became what he had to become to make a small thing stand against a large one. Hard, and at night he was soft and bled. In King's Landing, the small folk called Ned Stark the Good King in the first weeks because bread came and the watch kept its hands mostly to itself and no one bled on the steps of the Great September. They called him the Cold King when taxes came due and the levies were raised and his men drilled in the squares. They called him the Silent King because he did not make speeches, because he did not parade, because he moved through the city like a quiet sword. They learned his daughters' faces and watched the one smile and the other not, and whispered stories about both. They watched Renly walk with flowers tied to his scabbard and asked themselves whether summer had returned. They watched the hound drink water from a trough and splash his face like any other man and did not laugh until he was gone. The first summer storm came dark and loud, rolling up from the sea like a memory of ships. Lightning forked above the city. Thunder broke itself upon the hills. Ned stood upon the ramparts in cloak and crown and watched the rain make the mud honest. Renly came to stand beside him, laughing into the wind as if it were an old friend. "What is there to laugh at?" Ned asked. "Everything," Renly said, and wiped water from his eyelashes with his thumb as if they were jewels. "We might die tomorrow, or the day after. The storm is here, and for one heartbeat we are men with rain in our eyes and no enemies at all. Lauk, stark." Ned did not laugh, but he thought he understood. He thought of the first thunder he had ever heard as a boy clinging to the skirt of some nurse, and he thought of Bran listening with wide eyes, and wondered if his sons heard storms the same way he had. The storm broke upon Dragonstone too, and in its sound Stannis swore his oath aloud to a god few men in Westeros would name. The Red Woman stood with him, and the flames she loved danced in the rain as if it were their own element. When the storm passed, Stannis' ships slid from their moorings like knives slipping from sheaths. They came up the Blackwater in a line as straight as Stannis himself. Lookouts saw them at dawn and bells rang again, but this time the sound had no sanctity in it. It beat like fists upon a door. The city woke and poured to walls and keys. The watch took their places at the gates. Ser Barristan barked orders that were as simple as the man, "Hold, stab, do not be foolish." Renly's men took the river gate and the keys and made their spears into a forest. Loras was not there. Renly had sent him to Bitterbridge with messages for Marjorie, and the boy sulked on the road that he had not stayed to shine in this fight. Ned put Sansa and Arya in Maegor's holdfast with twice as many guards as he thought necessary. Arya argued until he looked at her with that quiet that made her angry and stop. Sansa kissed his hand and asked him not to be brave, which he did not know how to do. He stood upon the mud gate with mud squelching under his boots and watched Stannis' banners come on. The crowned stag upon gold had never looked so like a threat. Davos Seaworth stood in the prow of a ship with a look on his face like prayer and hope, and the hound swore beside Ned and spat rain. "Do we throw wildfire?" asked a voice at his elbow, Haleen the pyromancer sweating despite the storm. "No," Ned said, as he had said every time they had asked him in the last 3 weeks. "We do not cook our own people to beat our cousins." Crows watched from the broken teeth of old towers. The chain that could be forged to bar the river in some ancient plan lay still in a yard, never raised because there had not been time and because Ned had not trusted any scheme that killed men at random. The battle was steel and rope and courage. It was rams and arrows and men falling into water with iron on their backs. It was Ser Barristan on an old white horse moving like snow melting, cutting and parrying, saving young men who would tell their children about him. And it was Sandor Clegane laughing like a dead tree as he hauled a man back from a ladder and threw him into the muck without malice. It was Stannis at the far side of it all, never smiling, never cursing, just coming on like winter. They held the mud gate. They lost the river gate and took it back and lost it again. Ravens winged from the rookery with messages that would arrive too late for anyone who did not have a time machine. The day went on and rain came and went and blood made the street gutters into red scribbles. In the end, as dusk grayed everything, Stannis himself came ashore on a makeshift bridge of boats and will. He waded knee-deep and then thigh-deep with sword in hand, and men around him died without touching him. Not because he was charmed, but because he would not yield, and men around such a man sometimes choose to be spears, not men. He came to the base of the wall and raised his sword and called to be let in. Ned Stark went down to the foot of the wall with a few men only, because too many swords can turn parley to slaughter. Rain from the last squall still dripped from his hair into his eyes. His crown, damned thing, was in the tower of the hand. His sword was sheathed. Stannis' jaw was a machine. His eyes were an engine. "You have stolen my throne," Stannis said. "You will give it back to me. Now." "I have held it for the realm," Ned said, quiet as the rain had been when it first began. You and I will not settle this with swords. We will settle it with oaths and with the approval of gods and men. Gods and men made laws, Stannis said. You break them when it pleases you and keep them when it pleases you less. You sound like Robert. You have never sounded like a king. He took one step closer, water slopping. I will come back tomorrow with ladders and fire. Many will die. You could prevent that. Open the gate. Bend the knee. Ned thought of how easy it would be to lie to himself in this moment. He thought of the boys whose names he would never know, who would die on either side for what two men said in mud. He thought of Cersei in her chamber like a she-wolf in a trap, of Joffrey breathing like a cat at a window, of Renly smiling at something that was not a joke. He thought of Robb in Winterfell, of Jon on the wall, of Bran and Rickon, of Sansa and Arya watching him with two different kinds of faith. Tomorrow, Ned said, we will speak again. If you will stop the fighting at dusk and hold this shore, I will feed your men and give you time to dry. The city will do the same. You have my word. Then tomorrow we will open the gate, and you will come inside with 10 men only, and we will speak before the High Septon. You will make your case. I will make mine. We will let the realm see us. After that, we will do as necessity dictates. Stannis stared at him for so long that rain made patterns in the river that looked like writing. He breathed out finally, a small gust. You think words can hold in men's bellies, he said. You think honor is bread. But I will eat what I must and make others eat it if need be. He raised his sword, not as threat but as salute of a kind that only Stannis could make. I will come tomorrow with 10. If you cheat me, I will put your head on a spike and teach my daughter that this is what happens to men who pretend law is a ribbon around truth. They withdrew. The fighting guttered like a fire starved of air. Men lay in the mud and groaned. Some were Lannister gold cloaks who had come over to the crown in the last weeks. Some were Reachmen, some were Northmen, some were Dragonstone's men who still smelled faintly of smoke. The city shook itself and breathed. Ned stood in the rain until Ser Barristan touched his shoulder. You will die for this? The old knight said in his straightforward way, as if he were telling Ned. His boots were untied. Likely, Ned said, but perhaps not tomorrow. That night, Renly came to him full of arguments like a table full of platters. We cannot admit him, he said. You cannot give him the chance to look legitimate in the eyes of the city. He is not. Law without love is tyranny. Do not let him wear virtue like a sword belt. He is like iron, Ned said. It would be better to bend him than to break him if we can. Can we? Renly asked with a little laugh that did not find its smile. I do not know, Ned admitted, and that was a hard truth to speak. But I know this, we are running out of men faster than we are running out of pride. Renly said nothing to that. He touched the pommel of the knife at his belt as if it were comfort. If he comes into the city, he said, we will be 2 kings with 1 chair. That is not a stage for peace. It is a stage for tragedy. Ned said, I know. In the morning, Stannis came. He came with Davos and a small honor guard and no red woman. He walked through the gate as if walking through a book. The city watched, 1,000 eyes from windows and rooftops, the laughter of boys stilled in their mouths. 10 men only as agreed. Ser Barristan at Ned's shoulder. Renly farther back, face schooled to courteous interest. Littlefinger watching from a balcony where ivy did not quite hide him. Varys gliding as if his feet did not touch ground. The hound yawned and scratched his scar as if none of this interested him at all. They met before the steps of the Great September. The High Septon waited above, a small man made large by robes. The square held its breath. Ned spoke first because he was the one who had chosen this. I do not deny the law, he said. You are Robert's brother and his heir in the strictest reading. I denied you because I feared the realm would burn under your rule and I saw a path by which it might not. I may be wrong. It may burn anyway. I will not pretend otherwise. Stannis blinked. If surprise could live in that face, it lived there for a heartbeat. Davos looked at Ned with something like respect flickering on the edges of his tired mouth, as if he had seen a familiar lighthouse on a strange shore. I am what the realm needs, Stannis said. Not because it loves me, but because it needs a fire in the long night. Men who love their kings make weak realms. Men who fear their kings make brittle ones. Men who respect their kings make strong ones. I will be respected. And if the realm will not? Renly called from the column where he had been leaning, voice like an arrow loosed toward the heart of things. Will you salt its fields and call it righteousness? Stannis turned his head. You want feasts and progressions. You want songs. If you had asked me to be your hand, years ago when Robert was still a man who laughed more than he drank, I would have said yes. You did not. This is not a choice you get to make now. The High Septon lifted his arms, and his sleeves made wings. We will hear each claim, he said, and then we will. An arrow hissed through air and buried itself in the wood of the door behind the old man. There was a heartbeat of stunned silence in which the city itself seemed to say, "What?" The second arrow came as panic shook from men who had been standing still too long. This one aimed better and smacking into the curve of a guard's shield so hard his arm rang. The square exploded. Screams leaped from a dozen throats. The gate of the sept slammed as if it were a frightened child. Renly had his sword out in a heartbeat, blade singing. Ser Barristan was between Ned and the direction the arrow had come from before any other man had turned his head. The hound laughed, a sound like tearing. Stannis did not move. Davos pulled him behind a pillar with a tug that would have broken another man's shoulder. "On the roof!" someone shouted. "There!" But there were 100 roofs and 100 windows, and men ran in every direction, which is to say nowhere at all. Ned felt nothing for a moment but weariness that made his bones sound in his own ears. "Enough," he said, but his voice was not enough. He raised both hands and then lowered them. He looked at Stannis and saw, under the iron, a man who had been insulted 1,000 times and had always remembered each one. He looked at Renly and saw a man who could not stop moving, because to stop would be to feel something he had avoided since he was small. "Get him inside," Ser Barristan murmured, very calm. They went into the sept and shut the doors. The hush there returned as if it had been waiting, offended. Ned stood before the altar and took the crown from his head and laid it on the stone. "I have had this for a day," he said. "It weighs more than any helm I have worn. If you will bend the knee to me for a season, Stannis, if you will let me rule while the realm is brought back from the brink. Feed the city, put the watch in order, quiet the riverlands, parley with the Reach and the Westerlands. Then I will lay it down before gods and men and put it on your head myself. I will swear by the old gods and the new. I will not be your hand. I have no wish to serve your temper, but I will not bar your way to what the law gives you. I ask time and peace. I ask trust." He looked at the man hard and steady. "I know you do not have that to give. I ask it anyway." Renly made a low sound where he stood, almost a laugh. The High Septon held his breath. Davos closed his eyes and then opened them again. Stannis stared at him as if looking at a riddle he did not have the key for. Then he did something that shocked every man there more than arrows had. He laughed. It was a small bark of a thing, harsh as rope burning a hand. "You are mad," he said. "You think men can be ordered like stones on a board. I know men cannot," Ned said. "I ask you anyway." "I am the king," Stannis said. He reached out and touched the crown where it lay, one finger, as if testing iron for heat. "I will be the king. If I must take your city to be it, I will. If I must starve children to force you to be sensible, I—" He bit the words off. He breathed. "Take tomorrow," he said at last. "Send bread to my men. I will bring mine back from the far bank. Then I will send you my terms. If you refuse them, we go to war." "What terms?" Renly demanded. Stannis looked at him as if at a gnat. "You will leave my city." "It is not your city," Renly said. "It never will be." They parted like men who had married badly and could not bring themselves to cut the knot. Stannis returned to his bank. Renly returned to the Tower of the Hand, where he drank wine and smiled at nothing until Loras arrived dust-soaked from the road, apologies falling from his mouth like petals. Ned went to his daughters and let Arya touch the crown and let Sansa not touch it, and gave them both a kiss that tasted of salt because he had not dried his hair. In the evening, Littlefinger came to him again and leaned in a doorway like a man leaning on his own shadow. "You have made a bargain with a fire," he said. "Do you know what fire does to bargains? Burns them if you hold them too close," Ned said, "or warms you if you do not. You will find there is very little lukewarm about Lord Stannis," Littlefinger said. He smiled. "But let us speak of warmer things. The Tyrells have an idea. They have many." Ned rubbed his eyes. "Which particular flower do you bring me?" "Willis," Littlefinger said, savoring the S. "A cripple with a good head and better manners. They propose a marriage. Your elder daughter, their elder son, a garland for your crown, a leash for theirs. It is a generous offer while you are a usurper in the eyes of half the realm, and a bargain if you intend to remain a king for any length of time." Ned thought of Sansa's hungry, hopeful face and of Ser Loras's light and Renly's smile and Mace's slow cunning. "Sansa is a child," he said. "She is a lady," Littlefinger said, soft as a spider. "Ladies are coins. The mint is harsh." Ned closed his eyes and saw a Weirwood's face he had not stood beneath in too long. "I will speak with her," he said. "Not promise her." "Of course not." Littlefinger made a little bow. "We would not want to rush an auction." He straightened. "And in the Vale, Lisa has refused your plea for men. I can move there in other ways if you wish." He smiled the smile of a man who could always find a back stair when the front one was blocked. "There are men who would rather follow Yohn Royce than a frightened woman. Titles can be borrowed if you know whose wardrobes to open." "No," Ned said. "I will not have a coup in my sister's house. Leave the Vale." "As you command." Littlefinger bowed again to the idea of obedience, then drifted away to whisper into some other ear. The next morning, Stannis's terms arrived tied with plain string, written in a hand that looked like an axe had been taught its letters. He demanded the return of the Queen and her children to Dragonstone to be held hostage for their safety. He demanded that Renly leave the city and that all Tyrell banners depart within 7 days. He demanded that Ned Stark bend the knee and be forgiven if he did it in good faith and sent his daughters to foster at Storm's End. He demanded a dozen other things in smaller ink. He gave the city 3 days. Ned carried the letter to the window and watched the Blackwater, its surface broken with the movements of men like lice on a sleeping dog. He felt the crown on his head like guilt. He handed the letter to Renly without comment. Renly read and smiled and handed it back. "Shall we surrender, your grace?" he asked, as if asking whether they would sup on trout or ham. "No," Ned said. "Shall we make him a prettier offer?" Renly's smile stayed, but there was a knife beneath it. "No," Ned said again. "Then we must break him." Renly leaned his shoulder against the window and watched with him. "We cannot do that without the Tyrells." "Then we will have the Tyrells," Ned said. "Send for Mace. Send for his son." They came with scented sleeves and a train of retainers who thought every audience was a pageant. Mace spoke slowly and said very little poorly. Willis spoke little and said it well. He was not handsome and he was not beautiful and he did not need to be. His mind had a shape like a well-built hall, beams where they should be, angles that held. "I liked your daughter when I saw her in the yard," Willis said when Ned had sent Mace and Renly to batter each other with politeness. "She is frightened. I am also often frightened. It is a better basis for a marriage than some." "You will not have her," Ned said before he could help himself, and then he felt the foolishness of it, the small boy in him gripping a toy to his chest. "Forgive me. I am not made for this." He drew a breath. "If she consents and if this buys me grain and men, I will give you Sansa when she is a woman grown and not before. If I live that long. If you die, my father will try to have the match anyway," Willis said without rancor. "Do not die." He shifted his crutch. "Don't use wildfire at the river. It frightens men in ways that make them brittle. Use your old knight. Let him be seen. Men like to follow tales they can tell their sons." Ned found himself smiling. "You speak like a man who has watched soldiers." "I breed horses," Willis said. "Men are not so different, though they have more opinions." That night, Ned sat with Sansa and told her what the world was. Her face changed while he spoke. not because she had never heard such things, but because they were attached to her now and to the beating of her heart. She wept when he said she would never wed Joffrey, and then she did not weep when he said that one day she might wed Willis Tyrell. "He is kind," he said. "He is clever. He is not a prince," she said. And then she looked at him with terror at her own boldness and quickly added, "Your Grace, I am your father," he said gently. "When you speak to me in private, be my daughter." She took his hand. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am always afraid now." "So am I," he said. "That is how we know we are alive and not in some terribly brave story." Arya came in without knocking, which made Sansa flinch and made Ned's heart lift, and she crawled onto the bench beside him with no care for the crown on his head and put her head against his shoulder. "Syrio says men who use fear to rule are cowards inside," she informed the room like someone reading a proclamation. "Do not be a coward inside." "I will try not to," Ned said, because this was a vow he could keep. 3 nights later, the moon climbed a sky as clear as polished bone, and a fire blossomed on the far bank of the Blackwater like a flower from hell. Stannis' camp had burned. It took half the night to control it. Men said they saw a woman in red walking through the flames unburned. But men say many things when they have been roused from sleep by heat. Some of Stannis' ships cut their moorings too late and drifted downriver black hulks with men on them like bright sparks. And the city's men hauled them in with poles and ropes and pulled men from the water like fish. The smell clung to the river for days. Davos Seaworth came to the gate alone in the morning wearing ash and sorrow and asked to speak with the king. Ned admitted him because he had not stopped being Ned Stark yet, and because some men must be met where they stand. "My son's burned," Davos said, voice quiet, almost polite, like a man asking a favor in a market. "Only 2 of them, praise to any god that will listen. But 2 is twice the number any man can spare." He looked at Ned with eyes that were not angry because anger had been eaten already. "My king did not order it, but he did not stop it. You must know what you make when you make him king." "What did you make when you saved him at Storm's End?" Ned asked gently. "Did you ask then?" "I asked nothing then," Davos said, and there was that little ghost of a smile the man had, as if he had learned long ago that words could be friends or enemies and had chosen carefully. "I was less of a man. Now I am more and less both. Send me back with bread for those who did not burn. Send me back with words that will not make him hate you so much he cannot hear them." Ned wrote them himself. He wrote with a blunt quill and blunter hope. He told Stannis again what he would do if given time. He told him what he would not do. He told him that he would send the queen and her children nowhere but to the Sept and the Tower, unless a council agreed otherwise. That he would not send Renly from the city while Lannisters burned the Riverlands. That he would not send his daughters away to be hostages to any king. He sent bread. He sent bandages. He sent back Davos, who bowed and left and looked like a man walking into his own small death and doing it gladly. The next day, Stannis sent back a head in a sack with a letter that read only, "This is for your queen when you run out of bread." The head was golden-haired and could have been any man's. Cersei laughed when she saw it and laughed again until she bent double and tears ran from her eyes. And even her servants were frightened of that sound and did not know why. After that, no further parley was possible. The war that followed did not look like any of the wars ballads keep. It was siege and counter-siege. It was archers learning the names of men across the river because they shouted them when they shot. It was boats coming in the night with men crouched like frogs. It was men in the city telling themselves they were starving nobly and then stealing bread from their wives and hating themselves and eating anyway. It was Renly dancing upon the quay with a spear and 4 enemy men dead around him and his eyes empty of everything but motion. It was Ser Barristan taking a wound to his shoulder that would never quite let him sleep again. It was the Hound laughing less and drinking more water because fire climbed the river some nights like a rumor that would not be quiet. It was Littlefinger making certain the coin chests did not run dry while making sure that when they did, he would be the only one to know where to knock to fill them again. It was Varys whispering to bakers and watchmen and the wives of men who would never be watched otherwise, and knowing half an hour before anyone else when a man would break and run, and setting a hand where a hand should be at exactly the right moment. It was Mace Tyrell writing sentences that took a page to say nothing, and Willis Tyrell writing sentences that a squire could remember that saved 100 lives. It was Sansa visiting the sept with her maid and lighting candles for Stannis's men and for her father's and for the Riverlands and for a brother on a wall somewhere she had never seen. It was Arya climbing where she was not supposed to climb and learning when not to be seen. It was Cersei standing at a window and telling herself stories in which she was the heroine and cutting them off at the moment before the heroine was hanged and starting again. It was Tyrion Lannister at the Green Fork talking with Roose Bolton and thinking to himself that some men are iron and some are ice and some are water, and wondering which he was. It was Tywin burning the Riverlands with a look on his face like a man balancing accounts. It was Robb Stark drilling men in Winterfell's yard and writing letters to his father and throwing them into the hearth unsent when the words failed him. It was Jon Snow at the wall watching a curtain of lights in the night sky and thinking of a father he had not seen in years wearing a crown he had never wanted, and of a truth he had never been told, and beginning to understand that the world did not care whether he knew anything he should. When the long summer finally cracked and the first true hard rain of autumn came to King's Landing, Ned Stark stood in the godswood of the Red Keep and spoke aloud to a tree with no face. He told it what he had done and what he had not, what he would do and what he feared he could not. He told it that he would not be king much longer, because kings who preside over hunger fall, and because if he could not make a peace with Stannis in months, he would not make it in years. He told it that he would find a way to put the crown where law said it should be without setting the city on fire, or he would die trying. Renly found him there, because Renly had an unerring sense for where attention might be, even if that attention was only a man's own. "The gods do not listen when you speak to leaves," he said. "The gods do not listen when you speak to them at all," Ned said. "But the speaking does something to the man." Renly came to stand beside him, looking out at a pool where one last frog left circles like coins made of rain. "What does it do for you?" "Reminds me I am small." Ned rested his hand on the damp bark. "Reminds me to try again." Renly was quiet, rare as snow in summer. At last he said, "Marjorie and my mother would like to host a feast when the next grain ships arrive. Small but loud. Make the city remember what it is to be full." "That is good," Ned said. He thought of Sansa's face when bread was fresh and of Arya's scowl at cakes. "We will do it. And after that," Renly said, "we must break Stannis." He kept his voice very polite, almost bored. "He will not be moved by words. He never has." "I know," Ned said, "but I will try once more." He did. Failed. The winter that followed. Not the true winter, but the kind that comes early to men's hearts. Taught the city to be a beast with too many ribs and too few teeth. Taught Stannis that men will break and then harden a guy. And like metal that has been quenched. Taught Ned Stark that a crown is not a thing a man wears but a thing that wears the man. When the tidings came at last that Tywin Lannister had turned his army from the Trident and was marching south hard with 1,000 fresh horses and 3,000 men hungry for something that was not a cold camp, Ned understood that the end of one story had come and the beginning of another waited with its mouth open. "Open the gates for Stannis," he said to Ser Barristan, to Renly, to Willis and Mace and Varys and Littlefinger and anyone else who would hear. "We cannot fight both. We will kneel to law and make the lion fight it." Renly stared at him in something like horror. "You cannot." "I can," Ned said softly, "because I must." He looked at the crown on the table between them and saw not gold but a winter sun that hurt the eyes. "I have never wanted this. I have held it because there was no one else who could hold it and keep the city while I did. Now there is someone else. He is not the king I would have chosen, but he is the king the law demands. If you do this," Renly said, "you will lose everything." "Yes," Ned said, "except myself." And so he did what no man in King's Landing had expected him to do when they named him king. He made himself less. In the great September of Baelor, where he had been raised above men months before, he went down on his knees and took the crown and held it out to Stannis Baratheon. He did it before the High Septon and Ser Barristan and 100 men with swords and 1,000 with eyes and some thousands more outside with ears. He did it while Renly stood with face pale as sweet milk, and Mace Tyrell sweated and Littlefinger smiled and Varys did not breathe and Cersei laughed quietly behind a veil. "I have kept it," Ned said. As I swore I would, for the realm, I give it back to law." Stannis took it like a man picking up a tool he had been born to use and had only ever been kept from. He set it on his own head with no ceremony at all. He did not smile. He did not thank Ned. He said only, "Rise." Ned rose. Outside, the city listened and then made a sound like the sea when a storm withdraws a little way. Not joy and not grief, not relief and not fear, but the noise of a great beast turning in its sleep. Tywin Lannister marched toward that noise, and when he learned the shape of it, he smiled for the first time in months without malice. "Good," he said. "Now we know what we hunt." What followed was not peace. It was new war and new politics and old grudges with new names. But in the cold space where a man lives alone with himself, Eddard Stark found that he had not lost the one thing he could not bear to lose. He was less a king and more a man. He was a father with daughters who might yet live through all of this with something of their hearts unbroken. He was a lord with a north to remember and a south to withstand. He was a husband who could once more write to a wife without having to pretend he was made of something he was not. And when winter truly came, not to King's Landing, which had no room for it, but to the north and along the wall and down into the long dark places where men do not sing, it found him with a heart still his own and a will still iron. There are worse things for a man to be, in a world where crowns have teeth and the night can burn. Far to the east, across water that had swallowed so many stories, a girl with silver hair dreamed of a house with a red door and woke to the sound of a khalasar moving. In the far north, beyond all maps, dead things walked, and Jon Snow lit lanterns along a wall of ice and thought of a father he had not seen as a king and perhaps never would. In the Riverlands, a red priest lit a fire that would not go out, and Beric Dondarrion blinked at the world with new eyes. In the Reach, Willis Tyrell bred horses and wrote letters to a young woman in a city he hated, letters that did not lie. In the Westerlands, a lion old as rock counted men like coins. In the Stormlands, Renly laughed and did not find it funny. In the city that had once crowned him, Eddard Stark watched his daughters grow and taught himself to sleep a little each night and to rise though the day would bring fresh demands, and to be a piece of iron that did not break when struck. No song was made that men continue to sing that begins with the words "There was a king who did not want to be king" and ended in anything but blood. But there are stories that do not fit in songs, and lives that are not measured in crowns. And when men in that city spoke of the Wolf King in later years, they spoke of him softly, like a prayer. Not because he had kept the crown, because he had learned when to put it down. They crowned Stannis at noon beneath a sky hard as hammered steel. The High Septon's hands trembled under the weight of the circlet, not because it was heavy, but because of the man who would wear it. Stannis did not bow his head to make the placing easier. The old priest stretched, went up on the balls of his soft-shod feet, and touched gold to the king's dark hair with the care of a smith setting a first rivet. The sound in the hall was not a cheer but a held breath. The iron throne loomed behind them like a thing that had learned hunger. When it was done, Stannis turned and faced the hall and did not smile or raise his hand or look surprised by what he had taken. "I will keep the law," he said, the words falling into the stillness like stones into a well. "I will keep the peace. Those who will not keep either will be made to." That afternoon, the small council met in the painted chamber with the windows open to a wind that smelled of the river. Ned stood without his crown, which had begun to feel like an unhealed wound he kept rubbing. He had dressed soberly, in the gray and white of Winterfell. A single direwolf worked small at the breast. Renly lounged in a window seat like a cat, sunlight on green silk. Varys folded himself into a shadow as if to listen to the room, not the men. Littlefinger steepled his fingers and smiled at an invisible harp. Pycelle coughed and made his beard nod. Ser Barristan stood, not sat, by Stannis's right hand, as if he could put his body between the realm and folly and it would be enough. "The offices," Stannis said without preface. "They have been playthings too long. We begin with ships." "Davos Seaworth," Pycelle rumbled gently, as if rolling out the name to see if it'd bruise. "A smuggler. A man," Stannis said, "who has got ships where kings needed them and lives where men needed them. He will be master of ships." He did not glance at the maester to see if that had offended him. He has a mind like a straight blade and a tongue that is not afraid of truth. Truth is dangerous cargo, Littlefinger murmured. Often best smuggled, I agree. Stannis ignored him. Coin, he said, and looked at the master of coin as one might look at a table, considering whether to keep it and whether it could be repaired. You will remain Lord Baelish. You have a talent for sums and for keeping them hidden until they are needed. Littlefinger's smile did not reach his eyes. Talents should never go to waste. Nor to treachery, Stannis said. I will have your accounts by the next turn of the moon. All of them. How exciting, Littlefinger said, as if a new play had just opened and he had the best seat. Whispers. Stannis went on, turning to Varys. You have too many ears. You will keep them pointed at the Riverlands and the west. I want to know where Lord Tywin's host lies and where it will lie tomorrow. I want to know who in this city he speaks to by Raven and who he speaks to when no one is listening. His mouth thinned. If he has men in my walls, we will pluck them out by their roots. Varys bowed from the waist, a trick that made him look like a sail catching a small wind. I will do my poor best, your grace. Justice, Stannis said to Ser Barristan, is the king's. You were faithful to your oaths when the city was full of men who wore oaths like jewelry. You will be Lord Commander of my Kingsguard. Their duty was not made to be worn by men who forget words while counting gold. And the captain of the city watch? Ned asked. He had not sat either, and his lower back ached with a quiet, grave persistence that put him in mind of northern winds. Janos Slynt cannot be trusted. Janos Slynt will be sent to the Night's Watch for taking coin from the Lannisters while serving the city, Stannis said without any change in tone. You will find me the charges, Lord Stark, written and witnessed. We do not throw men into the dark without words. Ser Jacelyn Bywater will command the watch. Good, Ned said. It felt strange that one word could feel like cold water to a thirsty mouth. Pycelle, Stannis went on, turning at last toward the old man. You have Janei fever and a soft spine. You will serve until I find a man who can mix leeches and counsel both without whining. Pycelle's mouth opened and closed, but the air moved through it like a tired fly. There will be a trial for Cersei Lannister, Stannis said, and the room stilled. Even Renly's lazy head came up, and Littlefinger's fingers parted and touched again. The charges are treason to the king and the realm, adultery, and the putting of false heirs on the throne. The High Septon will sit with me for law. Evidence will be heard. The judgment will be mine. He turned his head. Lord Stark, you will bring what you have. Names, proofs, the book. Ned felt again the weight of the leather-bound treatise he had read by candlelight until his eyes watered, sigils and genealogies like frostwork on glass. And the children? He asked, because men in rooms forget children unless someone speaks their names aloud. They are no more to blame than any foal born with the wrong sire in the right stall, Stannis said. For the first time, a thing like a shadow passed over his eyes. They will be declared baseborn. The boy will be confined until he can be of some use or be none. The girl will be fostered where there are women with patience for lies that do no harm. The mouth cork that passed for humor with Stannis came and went like a gull. The other boy will be educated. He looks to be the only one of the lot who might yet be made into something that does not break when struck. Renly's laugh was soft and unpleasant. Kindness sits on you like a hawk on a mast. I do not wear it to be admired, Stannis said, and that was the end of that. Later, when the council had thinned and men had gone to fetch ravens or wine, Renly lingered. Ned was at the window where wind teased a scrap of banner that had gone uncollected, a red hand on white. The city below was busy with men who looked smaller than they were, which is what cities do to men. He is a winter come early, Renly said, sliding onto the sill so that his body made a sinuous S in the light. All gray and iron and a taste like old coins. Winter keeps grain, Ned said. Summer eats it. Renly watched him. You think he will keep yours? He flicked a nail against the stone. You do not need to be his. There are other ways to be a man in this city. I am mine, Ned said. That is enough. Is it? Renly's smile tilted. For you, perhaps. For your daughters. He hopped down lightly. If he burns the septs and drags red gods into our halls, will it be enough? He will not burn the septs, Ned said. He wanted that to be truer than he could make it. Renly's smile said only that he liked men who believed things. We will see, he said. They set a date for Cersei's trial, the first day the moon would show itself again. A day so ordinary men could cling to it like a plank in rough seas. Varys slipped a note into Ned's hand that evening as gently as if placing a moth on a leaf. In a neat, rounded hand it said, Gendry, an apprentice in the shop of Tobo Mott. He bears a look that should be known. Ned sent Harwin to the Street of Steel with quiet orders. See the boy safe and to the Tower of the Hand by the narrow ways. He put the note to the candle afterward and watched it curl and blacken, and thought of Robert with meat juice on his chin and laughter like a spear through sorrow. In the solar where they were kept, Cersei watched the light move across the plaster walls and listened to the quiet steps outside. She had learned the pattern of the guards passing and the way their boots made different sounds on different stones. She had made those men into pieces and moved them on a board in her mind until she could win. The trouble with boards is that they end at the edges, and beyond them is air you cannot place a foot upon. Joffrey threw a cup at the door and watched milk run in curdled rivulets. The hound watched the boy like a tired dog watching a child who had not yet learned to respect teeth. They will be judged, Cersei told her eldest son, brushing hair from his forehead as if he were still the babe who had once clutched at her gown. They will be judged, and we will be free. I will have them all killed, Joffrey said, but there was fear under it. He did not yet know all the names for fear. I will have Stark's head on a spike and let the birds eat his eyes. You will do all the things a king can do, Cersei said, because it was not a lie when you believed it so hard it made you shake. But not here. Here we wait. Tommen read with his lips moving. Myrcella's needlework came along well when she remembered not to pull too tight. The hound drank water and did not drink wine. When Sansa came, Cersei looked at the girl and saw something she despised and admired in the same glance. It is a hard thing to look upon your jailer's child and see a mirror of your own first shape. I am sorry, Sansa said once, the words trembling like a foal's legs. I did not want. She bit them off. She had learned something in the last months. She had learned where words were knives with the blade inward. We are all sorry, Cersei said, and laughed so softly only the girl and the dog heard. When the day came, the great September held the city. Old men who had not risen from their pallets in a month stood. Boys who had thrown stones at watchmen stood beside the watchmen as if stones and swords could both be set down if a man wanted to enough. The High Septon wore white and pearl, and his face was set in pious resignation, as if he might be called upon to be ruthlessly good at any moment. Stannis sat not on a throne, because there was no throne in the Sept, but on a high chair that had been made for lesser kings, and the way he sat on it made it the same thing. Ned stood at his right with a leather folio under his arm, and the heat of 100 candles pressing sweat up through his brow. They brought Cersei in with a dignity that had to be fought for. She had spent the morning making a fortress of her hair and gown, and walls can help you walk when legs alone might not. Joffrey came between two guards, the hound behind him like a shadow that had learned to move. Tommen and Myrcella were not brought. This was kindness, or strategy. With kings it is often both. The charges were read in a voice that made each word sound like a sentence. The names of the men Cersei had turned from their vows were not read. The one that mattered was, and it was said with the care of a priest setting a wafer on a tongue, Jaime of House Lannister. The sept hummed, a hive of judgment. The word bastardy was pronounced, and the word adultery, and the word treason, and they hung in the air like tapestries. Evidence was produced. The Book of Lineages. A boy called to stand in the aisle where light fell. A big-boned apprentice with hair like a crow's wing and a jaw like a Baratheon hound. Gendry stood as if the world had handed him a thing he could not put down and was watching to see if he would drop it. He looked at the queen as if she were a forge he had to walk into. Who was your father? The High Septon asked gently. I never knew him, Gendry said. A lord. He paid when I was born, and then I had a helm when I grew. A man told me once I had the look of the king. I don't know if it's true." Ned looked at the boy and saw Robert as he had been the first time they had ridden to war. Huge and eager and not yet brutalized by victory. Sorrow was a taste he was learning to swallow without making a face. "It proves nothing," Cersei said when they had done with their paper and the boy. Her voice filled the space like wine poured slow. "The man loved to fuck. Half the city has black hair somewhere in it. Shall we bring them all to look at?" "Your children were all fair from birth," Stannis said. "Every Baratheon born strong to a Lannister wife showed black in the hair of head and the thatch between the legs. The book shows it." He held up the leather-bound proof as if it were iron. "All save yours. There are other fair hairs in the world," Cersei said. "What is this but superstition painted in ink? The gods made me golden and I made golden children. Do you mean to kill a mother because you like black better?" A low sound rolled through the nave. "Love and anger are closer cousins than men like to admit." Stannis set the book aside. "Do you deny the thing with Jaime?" "Deny," she smiled. "If defiance could be sown, hers would have been a garment kings would envy. I deny nothing. I bear the Lannister pride. I am what my father made, what my mother made. What would you be if you could choose? Baratheon? So coarse." She tilted her head. "You will never understand beauty." Stannis's face did not move at all. "The judgment," he said, turning to the High Septon. The old man lifted his hands and looked at the gods carved in glass and stone as if to ask which of them wanted this done. "The faith has always held to the law," he said. "It must be held now as well. The children cannot inherit for the sin of their begetting. They are baseborn." His voice shook. "The queen has broken vows. We can call sin by any other name. It does not smell less of smoke. It is the king's place to pronounce sentence." Stannis rose. The city seemed to rise with him. "Cersei of House Lannister," he said, and his voice made the name sound smaller than it had ever been. "I name you traitor to King Robert and to the realm of men. I name you false wife and liar, murderer in your counsel if not in your hand. I will not burn you. That is not our way." For the first time that day, some men sighed and some women as well. "You will be taken to a tower and kept until I can deal with you when the wars are less. Your son Joffrey is no king. He is a bastard. He will remain in custody under the watch of Ser Barristan Selmy. If he tries to flee, any man may bring him down with the flat of a blade. If he kills a man in my city while in custody, he will be gelded." The words drove breath from the room. "Tommen and Myrcella will be fostered in good houses when the High Septon approves a match. The realm will make use of them if it can. If you attempt to subvert that, I will send your head to your father and make him read the letter that comes with it to the last word." He paused. "Take her away." Cersei did not scream or swoon. She nodded once, as if at a piece of music she had heard before. When she turned her head and looked up at the colored glass of the maiden, her mouth twisted. "I never liked you," she told the painted face. "You were always so dull." They led her out and Joffrey began to shout then. High and thin at first, then lower, as if his voice had to find a way to fit around his rage. The hound's hand settled on his shoulder and tightened until the boy's mouth snapped shut with a clack of teeth. "Words, Sta," Nyes said in the echoing quiet that followed, "are done. We return to work." Tywin Lannister read the news in a pavilion at Harrenhal under a sky that promised heat without mercy. He read without outward show, but his knuckles went white where he gripped the parchment and his jaw moved a fraction. He folded the letter with a precision that would have made a tailor proud and set it beside his trencher. Then he wiped his knife and cut his meat and ate, because no man commands others well when hungry, and he was not a man who liked to be less than he could be. "Treachery," said Ser Adam Marbrand, whose hair was as cleanly red as a banner. "The queen was a poor investment," Tywin said. He drank. "We will have to take a loss." He touched the letter one last time, then put it away like a forgotten debt. Not because he had forgotten, but because he never forgets and does not care to show it. "Call my captains." They came, Roose Bolton among them like a pale moth that had flown in from another place, hooded eyes made of winter water. Tyrion sat on a camp stool with his bad leg outstretched and watched men at the board as if they were pieces that might sprout mines while he watched. He had dust in his hair and in the lines at the corners of his eyes and a way of smiling as if his teeth hurt. "The city is Stannis's," Tywin said when they were assembled. "The wolf has left the throne. He is a lord again, which is what he knows how to be. The stag has what he believes is his by law. The Tyrells sift sunlight in their hands and try to decide which way the gold is falling. None of that matters if we cut their roads." He laid a hand on the map. "We hold Renly. We send the mountain north and west. We burn. We take hostages and we keep them alive. We send words to Old Town that tell them the faith is in danger from red priests in the king's bed, and the Tyrells' tables will be empty if bread is diverted to that heresy. We write to Pike. We whisper to Lord Balon that the north is fat and unwatched. We go to the twins and remind Lord Walder that there are some debts only paid by men with last names. And we send this," he tapped a second letter, "to Bitterbridge." "Which says?" Tyrion asked, light as a lark. "That Renly will be king with Lannister gold and Tyrell grain," Tywin said, as if he were describing weather. "That Marjorie Tyrell will be queen. That the Reach will feed itself and then the world, and be thanked properly with lands it has always coveted. That the Lannisters will bring down Stannis and the red mice he keeps in his pantry. That law is what the man with the bigger sword says it is, which is a lesson lordlings in sunlit gardens sometimes forget until reminded." "Treachery does grow well in gardens," Roose Bolton observed mildly. "The soil is rich, and the gardeners inexperienced," Tyrion added. "They forget to weed friends until they strangle the flowers." He sipped his wine, and his eyes were not as merry as his mouth. "Do you believe Renly will bite at your hook, father?" "He chose once to be a king," Tywin said. "Men who choose something once choose it again if the table is set with a sweeter dish. I will make sure the dishes are served hot and fast." The letter went. So did ravens to Pike, to Old Town, to the phrase, "the mountain road." Renly sent out fires that men would talk about in cottages for years to come, in whispers with doors bolted and hands on knives. At Bitterbridge, where river and road run as if to shake hands and then do not, Renly Baratheon read Tywin's words in a garden where bees moved like old men. Patient, persistent. Loras stood over his shoulder, a tower of green with the top sprouting sunlight. Marjorie sat with her hands folded in her lap like a weapon hidden in fine cloth. Mace Tyrell ate strawberries and moved his lips as he read, which made the juice drip a little more. "They would have me king," Renly said, and it was almost bored, as if someone had offered him excellent wine when he had already had his fill. "They would have my dear lady wife queen." His smile glanced at Marjorie, who returned it with the kind you keep in your pocket because it is worth something. "They would be rid of Stannis and his law." "They would use you," Loras said without heat. "Let them. Use them back." Renly looked down across the green where boys with their hair oiled like princes practiced the sword in a showy style designed to teach them nothing useful. "Stannis is king," he said, "in law and in practice. For the moment, he will grind the city like grain and bake it into a hard cake no one wants to chew. But he will keep it. The Lannisters will flay the Riverlands and then march with lion banners bright and gold and take it back. They will hang Stannis from his own law and make a ladder of his bones. Then we will be where we were, except with fewer men." He picked up the cup and put it down. "I have no wish to be ground between a law and a lion." Mace made an amiable sound. "We must think of bread," he said. "The city must be fed. The Reach feeds the city. The Reach must be thanked." Marjorie's eyes moved from her father to her husband-to-be and said, "You will do as I counsel, because it will be better than what you do as your own." Aloud, she said, "Willis writes from the city that the Wolf King has given Sansa Stark to him when she is a woman, a garland for our house. If we cut ties now, we will be seen as fickle. Our word will be worth less the next time we ask for another man's." "Men's memories are short and the Reach's larders are deep," Mace said. which is the kind of arithmetic that has kept big men safe in warm beds for generations. Renly laughed the way a man laughs when the blade misses his neck by a hair. You too would sell me glory by the bushel and expect me to count my change in the dark. His hand rested on Loras's wrist a heartbeat too long. I will not take Tywin's coin. Not yet. He stood. But I will not be a steward to Stannis. I will ride to Storm's End and raise my banners. If the realm begs for a summer king, I will give them one. If they do not, I will keep my own house and my wife and my life and let my brother reign in the ashes he makes. Send the word, quietly, and send Willis another letter, Marjorie, telling him again that our bread feeds his city while his king gives us iron in return and little else. He will understand what I cannot say. He left by night, because men who go softly can go further before being noticed. Loras went with him because it had always been the two of them or it had not been anything at all. Mace wrote to his factor in Old Town and told him to pause the grain ships a week, no longer, only long enough to see whether the wind would shift in a way that could be harnessed. Marjorie wrote a letter that Sansa would keep for years in a little coffer, her neat, precise hand like a trellis for flowers. I will keep faith if I can, she wrote. Family is not a rope one can drop without falling with it. In King's Landing they found Renly gone when a rose-bright boy did not appear to make the day prettier with his smile. Stannis's jaw did not move. His eyes did. They flicked to Varys and to Lord Baelish and to Ser Jacelyn Bywater and then to Ned. You knew, he said. Not accusing, not surprised, as if just taking the measure of a gap in a wall. I suspected, Ned said. He had seen Loras packing away the last of something in his eyes and had known what such packing meant. He is not a man who would serve you long. He is not a man who will serve anyone, Stannis said, which was unfair and true. He will make a claim. The Tyrells will decide which side of their bread they like the butter on better. He looked at Davos, who had come up from the river with tar still on one hand and salt on his crags. The Red Woman says she can stop him. Davos's mouth tightened. It was a small thing and the room might not have seen it, but Ned did. How? Stannis asked, though he knew, and because he knew he sounded almost tired. She would put out a light men have not lit, Davos said, and call it a mercy. No, Ned said immediately before Stannis could answer. He did not raise his voice. It was not necessary. I will not have murder done by sorcery out of sight of law. Stannis turned that heavy gaze on him. There was heat there and not the pleasant kind. You will not have. I will not have my daughters grow in a city where kings are made by shadows, Ned said. If you mean to be a king in truth, do it with the swords and words the world knows. If you do it any other way, you will not be a king that can be followed by men who need light to see. For a moment they were two hard things set against each other on a table that could barely hold the weight. Davos did not look away. Varys's lips moved, soundless. A prayer or a curse, it was hard to say. Littlefinger looked delighted in the way men do when another man finds the one loose stone in a wall. At last Stannis grunted, a sound like an axe embedding in wet wood. Send riders, he said to Ser Jacelyn. Find where he will make a stand. Take heads if you can. Bring him to me to kneel if you cannot.
No sorceri.
No women who light fires at their sleeves. That night, a girl with hair like a spill of copper walked through the lower city with a little procession of men who had taken off their helms because fear, like devotion, likes to see faces. She lit a brazier in an alley where 3 streets met and spoke in a tongue that purred like a cat. Men watched and some made signs against evil and some were too afraid to. A watch patrol came and put their spears down and listened until she went to light the next brazier and then followed her as if ropes had been tied around their necks. In the Tower of the Hand, Varys came like smoke through a crack in a door not quite shut and sat and spoke with Ned until the oil in the lamp went low. I do not hate many things, the eunuch said, and his voice was sad in a way it could be when he forgot himself. I hate what the Red Women call power. I have seen it take kings and cut them into pieces that did not look like men anymore. You did well today. You reminded him he might be a man even with a crown on. He will forget, Ned said. He will, Varys agreed. But we will remind him again if we can. 2 days later, a raven brought a letter to the Tower of the Hand sealed in green wax and smelling faintly of crushed leaves. Willis Tyrell's hand was careful and neat, each line a promise of thought. He wrote of the stables and a mare who had foaled twins and lived, which is rare and bodes luck when men need something to hang hope upon. He wrote of Sansa with courtesy that did not feel like flattery. I fear I do not like the city, but I like the fact that you are in it, he wrote, and then, in a line that Sansa would read 3 times and then press to her lips when her mate had gone, I will try to be brave where you are brave. Sansa brought the letter to her father and sat with it in her lap like a treasure she was half afraid to own. He is kind, she said, and her voice knew how to hold a thing up to light now. He does not make promises he cannot keep. He does not say beautiful things and then snatch them away. There are some beautiful things he cannot keep either, Ned said gently. His father has many opinions. He saw the flinch and wished he could keep all pain behind his own ribs where it belonged. But Willis is his own man. That counts for much. Sansa took a breath like someone who had been underwater and had found the surface with a hand. I can be brave too, she said, if it means going to Highgarden when I am bidden and being happy with a man I have met twice. I think I can be happy with him. Then I will try to keep the world arranged so that can happen, Ned said. Arya came in then with Syrio Farrell moving behind her, light as a bird in high wind. The little cat hears talk of men from the west, Syrio said, and his smile was like a blade held flat against a cheek. Men with a lion on their chest who speak of fire as if it is a friend. Men who ask for bakers who can make cakes with surprises inside. Poison, Ned said, weary and certain. Or a toy, Syrio said. But a toy can cut you when it is made of the wrong wood. He looked at Arya. Show your father the step. Arya showed him the step, heel to toe, the pause that made a man's eyes go to the wrong place. She grinned when Ned tried to do it and failed, and grinned more when he tried again and did it less badly. You are getting old, she said with the cruelty of love. So I am, he said. It will happen to you too if you are lucky. At Riverrun, Catelyn Stark sat with Edmure in a chamber that smelled faintly of damp reed and stale wine and watched rain smear the world into one long gray brushstroke. Edmure had grown a beard to look older, and it had the opposite effect, the way boys in their father's boots look more like boys for it. He burned 3 villages yesterday, he said through his teeth. The mountain. If I had men enough, I would put him in the river like a sack full of rocks. You do not, Catelyn said. And if you ride to him, he will ride away and burn where you are not. You must think like a man who cannot lift his sword, she added when he bristled. You must think like me. He looked at her then with the mixture of awe and irritation little brothers have for elder sisters who will not be what they were. What do you advise? Find small men with small swords who can move like rats and bite like them too, Catelyn said. Harass, burn his feed, kill the men who make his campfire and the men who put shoes on his horses, and the men who shit where the food is kept so they make men sick. Write to the Blackfish and do not be proud when you ask for him. You need him. Edmure swallowed pride like a bone. I will write, he said, and he did. At Pike, Balon Greyjoy held Tywin's letter as a man holds a dead thing he has been told is a gift. Aaron Damphair stood with wet hair streaming and eyes that saw ships where there was only air. Yara, men called her Asha when they forgot how to fear, leaned her shoulder against a post and grinned. He thinks to loose us like a wave upon the north, Balon said. He thinks we are water to be poured into any cup. We are salt, Aaron intoned, and bitter is the lot of those who drink without bowing. We are iron, Yara said, wiping her palm on her breeches. Dove go? We go, Balon said, and the old pride rose in him like a tide. While the wolf plays in the south and the lion gnaws the river, we will take Moat Cailin and pull down their little stone towers and ride to Winterfell to take back the thing a boy took from me with a signed paper. He spat. Send boats. Send knives. The raven he sent to King's Landing was courteous and smelled of fish. Proclaimed no rebellion. It said only that the Iron Islands were content to keep to their own, for the time being. Men who read it in the Red Keep remarked on the phrase in the way learned men do when they are nervous, with wit and wine. In the city the days ran, and the watch drilled, and men learned to look at Stannis and not expect warmth, which made it easier when it did not come. The Red Woman walked the streets less openly after a watchman had taken a torch from her hand and put it out in a trough without asking. She smiled at the man and said something in her own tongue that made his skin tighten, but she did not call him back. Celis Baratheon came from Dragonstone with a pale little girl who had a shy smile and a secret friend in the painted wooden knight she kept. And the court learned to walk around the queen the way men learn to walk around a well that is always a little deeper than they thought. Davos became master of ships and made the royal fleet less proud and more useful, which is the kind of change ships appreciate but lords notice only when it saves their lives. He spoke often with Ned, because they were men who could be quiet together without offense. They walked the quays, looking at ropes and men and food and the river, and learned each other's silence and found it companionable. "I have no love for the Red Woman," Davos said one morning as mist lifted off the Blackwater in strips, like veils being drawn. "But I have love for my king. I will tell him when I think he is a fool, and then I will serve him anyway, because that is what men do when they have given their words, and because I would rather serve a fool who keeps his word than a clever man who keeps only his own counsel." "I have love for this city," Ned said. He surprised himself. It was true. He had not expected it to be. "For the small lives. I will tell your king when he will break them with a law so hard it wounds instead of strengthens. And then I will stand with him against lions who would eat those lives without tasting them at all." "That is the best we can do between us," Davos said, and they stood and watched a gull settle on a piling and make it into a bit of shoreline. News came like blows, spaced so that men had time to tense before each one landed. Renly raised his standards at Storm's End. The green tide poured westward, Tyrell banners like an orchard on the march. The Redwine fleet left some of the Reach's coasts thinly guarded and slipped north. Mace lingered and wrote letters and measured grain while others measured steel. Willis wrote a single line to Sansa. "I will keep my word if my house lets me, and if they will not, I will keep it in the only ways that are left." "Tell him," Sansa asked her father, tears not in her eyes but under them, as if the lids did a good job and she was proud of them for it, "that I will keep mine even if it becomes only that I will not marry anyone else until I am forced to." "I will," Ned said, and did. At Harrenhal, Tywin read the news of Renly's standards and smiled in a way that made his men look down. It is not comfortable to see a lion bare its teeth when you are standing close by. "Good," he repeated. "He will crumble faster when he is sweet." The letter that Marjorie wrote to Sansa after that was courteous and careful. It spoke of weather and the health of Willis's favorite mare and the way sparrows nest on the keep's east wall this time of year. It said nothing that men reading might call a pledge. Sansa read between those lines and found a little space where two girls might put their hands and hold on. On a slick spring evening when mist made the city look like it was drawing back from itself, the Hound came to the Tower of the Hand with a look on his face like a sore tooth. "The boy tried the window," he said. "Blood speckled his sleeve. Cut his palms. He'll scar. Might make him smarter." He snorted softly. "Doubt it." "Thank you," Ned said. "Don't thank me," the Hound said. "I don't do this for you. I do it because he's mine in a way. You get used to things, even bad ones." "He is a child," Ned said, because he needed to say it to someone who would not laugh. "So are a lot of the dead ones out there," the Hound said, jerking his head at the city. "And there'll be more when lions show up. You going to stop that?" "I am going to try," Ned said. "Good," the Hound said. "I like a man who says he's going to do something and then tries it." He scratched his ruined cheek. "Red bitch makes the watch nervous. Make her stop lighting fires in alleys. Men watch fires. Makes them think of their own houses." "I will speak to the king," Ned said. "You do that." The Hound's mouth twisted. "You're a better hand than any of the ones with the title." "I am not his hand," Ned said. "Could have fooled me," the Hound said, and left. Stannis was in the solar that had been Rober. Tease, a map unrolled on the table and pins set into it like men sent to their deaths. Melisandre stood in the corner like a flame behind glass. Celis was absent. Shireen dozed in a chair with her wooden knight fallen on its side in her lap. "She lights fires in the streets," Ned said without preamble. "Men are afraid of what they do not know. We have enough fear." "She says it keeps the night at bay," Stannis said. "She says my city is full of demons. It is full of bakers and whores and men who like their wine too strong," Ned said. "If the demons are here, they have been here longer than we have, and the fires have not helped much." Stannis's mouth worked once, twice. "Leave the fires," he said at last, and Melisandre's eyes gleamed. "But no more in the day, and none where the watch walks. And if one watchman is burned, she leaves the city." "She," Melisandre said softly, "is in the room." "You are the king's counselor, not the king," Stannis said flatly. "I will be counseled. Then I will command." She bowed her head. "As my king wishes." "Your men will follow you," Ned said when they were alone. Shireen still sleeping like a small safe kingdom. "If you do not make them choose between you and a god, they think they understand. The red god is a new blade. Men cut themselves badly with new blades." "I will not bend to please them," Stannis said. "I will not bend to please you. There will be no more kings made in shadows. There will be no burning of the septs. But I will not pretend your gods have saved anyone I loved from anything. I will pray in a room alone and let them be, and they can do the same." "Thank you," Ned said, "because sometimes a king's refusal to be mad is a gift." The riders sent after Renly did not bring him back. They came back with word of a camp near Bitterbridge where banners snapped like sails and men ate as if food had learned how to grow underfoot. They came back with word of a pavilion where great lords laughed and made plans with fruit in their mouths. They came back with word of a dawn when screams woke a small world and men ran to see a thing that could not be. A man like a shadow slipping into a tent and the man inside it dying with his throat cut and his eyes full of disbelief that had less to do with death than with who had opened the door. They came back with word that Renly Baratheon was dead. The city held that news in its mouth like a hot stone. Loras Tyrell howled like a dog and then went quiet, which is worse. Mace turned a color men seldom do outside the grave. Marjorie moved like a woman wading through a river in a dress too heavy for her. Slow, sure, eyes fixed on a point well beyond whatever men in the room were doing. The Reach shrieked and then sang and then made up its mind like a field choosing which way to bend in wind. It bent toward Tywin Lannister. "What did you do?" Davos asked, his voice low and very tired. "In the King's Solar where maps could not show you rivers like the one running out of Loras's eyes." "I refused her," Stannis said. He did not say "I refused her too late." "She has other firebearers. It is possible that you are king because a shadow cut your brother's throat?" Davos said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "My king, there will be no law in that. There will be no respect in that. There will be only fear, and fear is a poor foundation for a city with so many mouths." Stannis stared at him for a long time. He did not ask Davos to leave his presence. He did not tell him his place. He said only, "I did not bid it, but I did not stop it. Is that better?" "It is what it is," Davos said. "Make it into something that can be looked at by day. Put away the Red Woman for a while. Send her to Dragonstone. Send your queen with her. Keep the girl. Let her read with the Wolf King's children and learn from a city that..." His mouth twisted. "That knows how to go on living even when it is badly ruled." Stannis's eyes went at once to the door, as if to call for Melisandre and tell her to pack her red silks. Then, as quickly, they went to the sleeping child with the little wooden knight that had lost an arm and did not seem to mind. "Very well," he said. It sounded like a man consenting to be cut to save a limb. "She goes. Celis goes. The girl remains." He drew a breath. "Davos, my king, be my hand." Davos went very still. He looked like a man who had been told the sea would be given to him in a cup. "I am no lord. You are a man," Stannis said, "and you advise me. My hand must do both those things. I will hear you. The realm will see you. I do not care whether it likes you. Davos bowed very low, which made his back creak like an old ship's hull. "I will tell you truths you do not want," he said gently. "Good," Stannis said. "I am tired of pretty lies." The Tyrells turned. They turned as one turns a plow team, with some snorting and stamping and a show of reluctance that fools men into thinking it is hard to do something you do with relish. The Redwyne fleet put into Duskendale with flags like summer. The High Tower sent men and 100 wagons of grain, and Mace took a breath and sent only 50 of them to King's Landing and 50 to Lord Tywin, because one must never show too much love to a man who will use it to choke you. Willis wrote no letter that week. Sansa waited and pretended not to look as the maids came and went, and the trays did as well. Tywin marched. He came along the Gold Road with a snake's patience and a drum's certainty. He sent a letter ahead to Ser Jacelyn Bywater. "Come out and fight," it said in other words. Bywater complied once and broke the first line with long spears and barricades and fire in ruined houses where men from the west coughed and swore and died. The Redwyne fleet raised sails in the bay like a white forest. Davos rowed out in a small boat and looked at that forest and said quietly, "We will starve unless we break something they believe cannot be broken." "What?" Stannis asked. "Them," Davos said, and pointed to the city. "Or you." Ned ordered the gates shut and the last of the grain counted and the cellars sealed with wax that had seals impressed and 3 men's hands on each. He ordered the watch to keep sticks in their hands as often as swords and to use them twice as often. He spoke in the squares, which he hated, and said things like, "We will not burn our own and men must eat, and I will not have bread priced like gold." And because he said these things without shouting, and because he had not lied to them when he had taken the crown and had given it back when he said he would, the city believed him for 1 more week. On the 7th day of the siege, Willis Tyrell's letter finally came, stained by water that made the ink bloom into small, ragged flowers. "Forgive me," it said, "which is the hardest thing an honorable man ever writes. I am my father's son and my house's brother. I cannot stand against them. This is not a thing I can mend with words. I will not take another bride until I am forced to, and then I will be as polite to her as I know how. If there is anything you wish of me that I can give from a distance, ask it, and it will be done." Sansa read it and folded it and pressed it against her mouth and then against her breastbone where it hurt, and then she wiped her eyes and wrote back, "Be brave as you promised. I will be brave as well. Sometimes that means standing still, and sometimes it means learning to walk when the road is not the one you would have made. Remember me when it rains." Arya learned to slip through a city with too many eyes. Syrio made her walk on a wall for an hour with a bowl of water on her head. And when it fell, he made her do it again and again until she wanted to throw the bowl at his head and did not. The hound caught her once on a stair and looked at her feet and grunted. "You could run from me," he said, as if this was a thing he wanted like a hound wants a bone. "Don't." "I wasn't," Arya said. "Good," he said. "Some men don't like to be shown they're slow. I'm not one of them. Are you my friend?" Arya asked because she had not lost the habit of asking the most dangerous questions. "No," the hound said, "but I'm not your enemy unless you get in my way." He shrugged. "That's almost as good." Varys visited the Sept in the night and knelt in a shadow no one else used and said nothing for a very long time. When he rose, he left a small purse of silver behind. The Septa who found it in the morning used it to buy broth for a dozen children who would have died otherwise, and then cursed Varys and all the men like him, which is the closest men like Varys come to being blessed. Catelyn Stark rode to a burned mill and found 19 bodies piled in a ditch and a girl kneeling beside them with a look on her face like a blade. Beric Dondarrion stood with one hand on the girl's shoulder and the other doubled on the pommel of his sword as if he could hold himself up with a blade. Thuras of Myr drank from a wineskin and sang under his breath in a tongue that made the air warmer. "We are getting worse at living," Beric said, "and better at killing." "Stop being good at either," Catelyn said. "Be good at hiding and at stealing food from men who do not need it, and at making my brother think he is in charge when he is not." She looked at the ditch. "If you can only do one good thing today, burn these so their mothers will not have to see the work the crows have done." "We will do 10 good things," Thuras said, and kissed the wineskin and set it aside and rolled up his sleeves. "Or 3 very good ones." On Pike, the sails were dark and full. Theon Greyjoy stood on a quay and looked at a ship with a smiling kraken on its prow and felt his heart do a thing he did not want. Ravens flew over his head, going inland. He looked west toward the green he had never loved the way men should love the lands that raised them, and east toward the gray water that had always sung to his blood, and he smiled like a man watching two women he cannot choose between. He wrote a letter that night to Robb Stark that was all wrong. Too stiff in places, too familiar in others, and full of promises to see him soon that he did not know how to keep. Then he wrote another to Ned that was better. Then he burned them both and went aboard the sea bitch and told himself not to look back, and looked back anyway. Jon Snow stood on the wall and watched lights move under the skin of the world like fish under ice. He thought of a father in a city that ate men and spat bones, and of brothers who were not brothers, and of a sister who would hit you in the mouth if you said she could not do a thing. The wind brought him the smell of snow that was not yet there and the sound of men on the move on the far side, and he felt dread and longing pull him in two directions, and he smiled into the wind as if it were an old enemy he had learned to love. Daenerys Targaryen sat beside a fire that did not warm as well as the three long shapes sleeping curled near it, and remembered a house with a red door and the smell of lemons, which she had never smelled in truth. Her dragons were small and full of an arrogance they had from some ancestor older than money. She touched one, and it tasted the air with a tongue like a strip of smoke. She closed her eyes and saw a throne made of swords that men had died to put in a room where no one could sit without bleeding. She opened them and saw sand. She whispered, "Not yet," to both. Tywin Lannister came up at last to a city tired from defending itself against the day. He set his camp beyond bowshot and not quite beyond rumor's reach, which is where great lords like to put their tents. He sent a herald with a trumpet and a parchment with many thick words, and those words said, "The king inside is false, and the men with him are thieves, and the children he holds are mine, and I will starve your wives first, and then your husbands, and then your children, and then I will open your city and feed the bodies to dogs, unless you throw down your gates and give me the heads of the men I name." The list of names was long enough to be a scholar's chapter. Ned's was there, Davos's, Varys's, Peter Baelish's was not, which amused him and frightened others, which is how Peter liked things. Ser Barristan's was there and written in ink darker than the rest, as if the pen had bled for a moment thinking of him. Bywater took the parchment to the top of the Gate of the Gods and read it out loud to the men standing with their halberds canted and their mouths set. When he finished, he tore it neatly in half and then in quarters and then in eighths and let the pieces go. They lifted in a little sigh of wind and went away. The watch cheered the way men do before battle, too loudly, then in a hoarse, ashamed tone. Stannis met with his hand and his lord commanders and the men whose voices carried in rooms and on streets. Davos drew lines on maps with a knife point and said, "We will shut this gate and leave that one cracked and put the spears here where their horses cannot run." And Bywater said, "The men will hold if you let them see you on a wall and do not let them see you off it." And Ser Barristan said less, because there was little to say that could be put in words 1,000 men would remember when they needed them. Ned spoke when he had to. He did not preach hope. He asked for steadiness and got it. Sansa sang in the sept with a voice that had grown low and sure since she had learned that sometimes singing is breathing when breathing won't do. Arya cleaned a knife and did not look at anyone while she did it. The hound slept against a wall with his sword in his arms like a child's doll. At dusk on the 5th day of the siege, the Red Wine fleet moved close in on the tide, white sails gray in the evening light, and from the shore men watched as a thing the city had never seen before crept out from beneath the arches near the dragon pit. Iron that wore barnacles and weed and had not seen day since men who were dust had set it there. It was a chain, each link the size of a man's chest, hauled with curses and pulleys and the strength of 100 men working in rhythms older than their own lives. Davos had found it rusted in a rock belly and had made men rub oil into it like love and had tested the skirts of the river and the teeth of the walls until he was sure it would lie as a serpent ought. He gave the signal with a torch that flared twice and then held steady, and men grunted and sweated and the chain came up, inch by inch, and settled across the Blackwater like a line a child draws when he is learning to make letters. The Red Wine captain saw it late and cursed and backed sails, and ships at the rear bumped those ahead and swore, and ropes snapped like harp strings. Men on the walls cheered and then remembered to be still and listen for horns. The chain lay quiet in the dark, a new word written on the water that no man had learned to read yet. Davos wiped his face and looked very tired indeed. "It will break," he said to Ned, whose hands had the aches of a day's work in them for the first time in years. "Or they will. Everything breaks." The lion host came at first light. Tywin did not ride at the front. He sent others to test the wall, men whose wives would curse him if they lived and curse him if they died, and then go into service in another man's house and feed his children and their own hunger as they could. The first wave broke on spear points and wood and men who did not want to die in streets where they had scraped their children's names into the dust with a stick. The second wave came slower and got closer and died more expensively. The red wine ships moved and moved again and found themselves in a river that did not behave as rivers should, and the chain rose with the tide and then did not fall with it when pilots expected it to, and a great cursing filled the morning like smoke. "Archers," Ser Barristan said in the calm way men say bread, and they loosed, and red and green fletchings lifted and fell, and men lost eyes and hope in the same heartbeat. Bywater kept the gate steady, and the men saw him and steadied too. Stannis moved along the wall in mail and leather and poured law into men where it made bread for some and iron for others. He did not say many words. He did not need to. He had a face that made men not want to shame themselves in front of it. He looked down at the host that had once belonged to the richest house in the realm and set his mouth, and men who saw it told the story later to boys who learned that a certain kind of mouth means something is about to be done that cannot be undone. In the tower where the queen had once lived, Joffrey watched from a slit of a window and put his hand where the stone scraped it too thin and bled again, because sometimes pain is the only way a man knows he is a man at all. The hound sat on a stool and sharpened his sword with slow, careful strokes that made a sound like a very patient river. "If they take the walls," he said without turning, "stay behind me when we go, and keep your mouth shut." "They won't take them," Joffrey said, which is the bravest thing he had said in his life because he did not believe it. "Good," the hound said. "Harder to keep you alive if they do." On the 5th hour of the fight, a horn sounded in the lion's camp, deep and long. Men on the walls turned their heads as one animal does when a sound crosses a field. The press eased as if an unseen hand had leaned on it. Then, like a tide going out too fast, the men on the field drew back. "Why?" asked a boy at the mud gate with a voice that cracked in two places. "Because someone wants them to," Ser Barristan said, and then, to the men around him, "Drink water, eat bread if you have it, piss. The next wave will be worse." But it did not come. The lion host drew back out of range of easy arrows and set tents and built small fires that made neat smoke. They had no intention of giving the city peace. They meant to starve it. The red wine ships tried once more to break the chain and failed. The bay filled with patient white. The city settled into a blank, waiting hunger. Tywin sent another letter. Said, "We can do this for a month. We can do this for 3. We can do this until your children eat leather and your men eat rats and you eat your pride. Surrender." The names were there again and, for the first time, Willis Tyrell's was added, which made a man in Highgarden drop a goblet hard enough to dent it. Davos counted sacks. Bywater cut thieves' hands off in the street and wept afterward where no one saw. Varys heard men talk in beds and cellars and knew where a riot would begin before the men in it decided to riot. He put men there who were good at standing and at not being moved, and the riot did not happen that day. A Septon gave the last of the flour in his charge to a whore with twins and was beaten by men who had come hoping it would be theirs, and he forgave them without being asked and bled to death on a step where pigeons came after. Ned Stark went to the godswood that was not a godswood and spoke to a tree that did not listen and felt better because speaking sometimes puts a bridle on a man's fear. He sent ravens north with orders to harvest early and send grain by ship if waters stayed fair. He sent ravens to Riverrun and to White Harbor and to the Manderley men who had ships and asked them to be what they always have been when the world needed work done. Fat, careful, generous, and cunning. He sent a letter to Jon on the Wall with only one line. "Be ready for a winter that may fall like a hammer." At sunrise on the 9th day, a boat slipped the chain because it was small and ugly and full of men who had Leah. Rened to make the river love them, and Davos Seaworth sat in it and did not hold in or but held a rope that was a snake and made it behave. He went to the red wine flagship with a flag tied to a stick that had once been a broom and asked for wine. They laughed. He asked for bread. They laughed again. He asked for a parley. Red wine liked parleys. They bring wine and stories and, sometimes, women in men's clothes. He nodded. They took him aboard. He stood before Lord Pax to Redwine and said, "You cannot starve us without starving the city you mean to rule." Paxter laughed. He had a good laugh, rich and oily. It made men want to like him. "We do not mean to rule it," he said. "We mean to take it and give it back to men who will not burn the gods." "My king has sent the Red Woman away," Davos said. "He sent his queen too. He has sworn before the High Septon that he will not burn the septs." He spread his hands. "He will hang thieves, and he will tell bakers what to charge, and he will be hard and not pleasant, and he will not burn your gods. And he will keep the Tyrell girl from being queen," Paxter said. He smiled and took an olive and chewed it as if it were a thought. "We are not in this for bread, only onion night." Davos looked at him with eyes that had learned to see a rock under a wave. "Then starve," he said. He turned his back and they let him go because killing one man is never as satisfying as starving 10,000, and because killing one man sometimes makes 10,000 do things you do not want them to do. That night, Varys came to Ned with a face he did not often wear. The face that looked like someone had cut a part of him away and he had not yet figured out which part. "He means to send Joffrey away," he said. "Lord Tywin has offered terms he can live with. The boy for bread. He thinks to sell you a siege for a sack." Ned stared at him until the air between them curdled. "No," he said. "It is not your choice," Varys said very gently. "He is the king." "It is my city," Ned said, "and my word has been given. The boy is a guest in my walls, if not in my heart. Men will not forget if we sell him for loaves and call it virtue." "Men forget everything," Varys said, "but they remember the flavor of bread." Ned went to Stannis. The king stood staring at a candle as if it might confess a crime if glared at long enough. "You will not send the boy," Ned said. He did not ask. "If you do, you will have a riot bigger than the one you fear, and the loaf they throw at your head will be the last meal you eat on a chair." "The law says he is nothing," Stannis said. "The city says he is a boy," Ned said. "They will not watch you sell him for bread if they think the loaf will be snatched away before it reaches them. He is a symbol, and you know what symbols do when men are hungry? They begin to taste like meat." Stannis shut his eyes a moment. "You love the city more than the crown." "I love my soul," Ned said. "And the city is where it has to live right now." Stannis's mouth twitched. "Very well," he said, and when Davos came with the bread for boy plan like a bandage he had stolen, the king cut it in half and threw both halves away. "We will keep the boy," he said. "We will find bread another way." "We will find it," Davos said, "or we will eat smaller." He did not say who would be smaller. In the night, Littlefinger came with a smile like a cloak. "You cannot win this way," he said. "You can win other ways. I have other ways in my pocket." "I do not doubt it," Ned said. "I do not want them." "You have daughters," Littlefinger said without malice. "I would not suggest suffering for the sake of principle if I had daughters." He leaned in. "The Tyrells are marrying their maiden to whomever can give them a throne. If you make it easy, she will sit on one and your Sansa will go to Highgarden and smell roses the rest of her days. If you make it hard, the girl will sit on this throne and Sansa will smell smoke. Choose." "I have chosen," Ned said. "Stark to the last," Littlefinger murmured. "I do love a consistent story." The siege tightened. Bread shrank. Tempers lengthened, then snapped. Twice, Ned had men he had known only by sight hanged for stealing grain from a granary with a broken seal. He watched them swing and forced himself to think of their mothers and their small, ordinary loves, so that he would never be able to pretend the law was clean. Sansa helped in the sept until her hands were raw. Arya took a loaf from a man with a sword and gave it to a woman with a bruise and then ran, or she would have had a sword put in her for her trouble. The hound saw and said nothing, and later pressed a flat cake of oats into Arya's hand and called her a fool with a voice that did not have enough bite to draw blood. On the 15th day, as if the gods had decided the city had strained enough. A small miracle occurred of the sort no song keeps. The Manderley ships came in, 12 of them, fat-bellied and pale as if the North had taught them to be humble. They came under cover of a night when the red wine ships had pulled back to adjust lines and to curse pilots. They came with decks piled with barrels. They came with a wolf's head flag that made men on the walls weep because sometimes symbols taste like bread too. Wyman Manderley had written to Ned 3 days earlier, "We will break our keels before we break our word." He had. The last ship came in with a hull that sounded like a dying horse when it touched the quay. Men on the quays wept and laughed and prayed and cursed in the same short breath and lifted barrels like children even though their arms shook and their backs hurt. Bywater stood on the quay and counted and then stopped counting and just watched men eat with their eyes. Tywin tightened his ring. Hunger returned, but not with the same teeth. The city learned to be still with hunger in its lap like a dog. The red wine fleet watched the river chain glint and did not like that a city could learn new tricks while starving. Davos slept 3 hours, then rose and counted. Stannis read law until candles bled tears down their flanks. Varys listened. Littlefinger smiled. Ser Barristan walked the ramparts and thought of the kings he had served and those who had killed him a little with each choice, and he prayed to no god at all that when his time came to fall, he would not have to fall for something that made him ashamed. It did not end. It did not even become something a man could call even. But there were days now when bread was baked and the scent of it made men's mouths water without making them wolves. There were nights when the city slept and did not wake to screaming. There were mornings when the wind came off the river oddly clean and made even the hangings smell almost new. There were hours when Arya forgot to watch every hand near her and allowed herself to look up at the sky. There were minutes when Sansa forgot to be brave because she did not need to be, and those minutes were better than sleep. Then a raven came with a strip of parchment tied to its leg and a smear of ash on its wing. It had flown far and hard. Its feet trembled when the boy at the rookery untied the string. The words were few and written in a hand the king's men had learned to know because letters always say more with the shapes they make than the words they spell. It was from Castle Black. Said only, "We have seen dead men walk. Send men. Send fire. Send a king." Stannis read it without change in his face. Ned read it and looked at the city and then north with his mind as if he had a glass that could show him both. Davos read it and said, "My king." Stannis held the parchment a long time. He had been made for wars of succession and rebels in red silk and lords with complicated hearts. He had not been made for the old, cold truths that do not soften when elections change. He turned to Ned. "You wanted me to be a king men could follow with their eyes open," he said. "Here is the test." "You will leave?" Ned asked. He did not put hope or fear in it. He could not afford either. "I will go north," Stannis said. "When I can. I will leave the hand to hold the city." He looked at Davos. "And I will leave Lord Stark to keep the men from eating each other while you are counting coins." "And the lions?" Littlefinger inquired, quite pleasantly. "Will be here when I return," Stannis said. "Or not. The wall will not be if I do not go." He looked at the parchment again, as if it might decide to soften if glared at long enough. "We have made a war about crowns," he said, half to himself. "Now the world asks us whether we meant any of what we said." Ned thought of a godswood and of small faces carved in old wood and of his father and of a boy on a wall learning to breathe in cold air. He thought of a lion whose teeth were bright with the fat of villages. He thought of 2 girls who had grown taller during a siege and of a woman in Riverrun who was learning how to be hard the way a river is hard. He thought of the sound of the sea beyond Pike and of a girl with 3 small dragons in a land that did not yet know it would have to learn new words. He said, "Go!" And he felt pain and relief in the same place. Stannis went to the map and moved pins. He sent ravens and pulled men from the walls and from the river and from rooms where they had been listening to bread rise. He chose a few hard-mouthed Stormlanders and a handful of Reachmen who had not gone to Tywin because their fathers had died under lion hooves and their sons would grow up in houses still smelling of blood. He had Ser Barristan choose 50 who could keep a horse alive in snow and not complain. He had Davos put hulls in order and oats in sacks. He looked at Melisandre's empty corner and did not send for her. On the morning he rode, the city was gray and quiet. He came to the gate with no music and a company that did not dress like a parade. Davos rode at his left hand with a face like a cliff. Ned stood on the wall in a cloak that had been mended twice and watched men he did not know and had come to love in the way you love those whose lives weigh on your own fingers. Stannis looked up and saw him and gave a nod, a small one. It was not warmth. It was respect given in the coin Stannis had. "Keep them," Stannis said, only half aloud. "I will," Ned said. "Bring bread out of the stones," Davos said to Ned in his quiet way. "I will try," Ned said. "Try is the only thing we have," Davos said, and then he was gone, and the king with him, and the sound of hooves faded faster than it should have on a day when wind was not doing much at all. The lions did not fold their tents and go. They watched the city now with eyes that were waiting for a father to turn his back so they could take a cake from the pantry. Tywin read the news and smiled, a thing no man in his tent liked to see. "He goes where kings are made," he said. "Let him. We will see whether the making is good." The red wine fleet tugged at its anchors like dogs held on two short leads. Mace Tyrell sent letters that said nothing with 10 different ornaments per paragraph. Willis wrote to Sansa, "If the king goes north and the world does not lie, then we will know which of our songs were worth singing." Loras took his grief and folded it carefully and put it inside his armor where it would keep like salt meat and stink a little but feed him when he needed it. Marjorie stood on a balcony in Bitterbridge and let the wind make her hair move and thought, "I will be queen of something or I will be good, and either will be a kind of power." In the Tower of the Hand, Arya practiced the step that made men's eyes go to the wrong place, and Sirio's smile told her when to stop and breathe. Sansa lit a candle in the sept and watched the wax run and thought the strange thought that sometimes hunger had made her think. "It is good to be alive because it means I can still be brave." The Hound laughed at a joke a stable boy made and hit him lightly enough that the boy did not cry, and then told him not to repeat it because some men do not like their mother's names in the punchline. Ned Stark went to the balcony and looked out over a city that had teeth it had learned to use. He looked beyond it to camps that smoked like low clouds and to a river that had a chain like a new scar. He thought of the first day he had come to this place with a letter in his doublet, and the last day he had worn a crown, and the day now when he stood as a man without either and only his word. He found that the word weighed as much and steadied him more. Far away, a wall of ice waited for a king and for a fire and for a night that could not be haggled with. In a hall at Harrenhal, a lion counted the days it would take for a man to freeze. And in a garden in Highgarden, a cripple breathed in the smell of rain and wrote a letter that sounded like hope without saying the word. On Pike, a father told himself that the sea had promised him a crown, and in the Free Cities, a girl with 3 dragons and a memory of a door painted red dreamed of a place where kings burned and did not come back except in stories. The city in between learned how to live one day at a time without lying to itself about the next. It learned to fight without becoming the thing it fought. It learned to keep bread in ovens while men argued about gods and kings in rooms that smelled of wax. It learned to hear a trumpet and not panic. It learned to love a quiet lord better than a loud king. Night fell and the lamps were lit, and from Maegor's holdfast a boy looked out at the dark and did not throw anything at it. He pressed his bandaged hands into the stone and whispered the names he knew. Mother, grandfather, dog. He did not say father. He did not know how to shape that word without breaking it. Ned turned from the parapet at last and went down into the keep with a step that was beginning to feel familiar again. He had things to do that were small and therefore critical. A meeting with bakers who had flour and no wood, a visit to the armory where boys beat iron into shapes that saved men's lives and sometimes did the opposite, a talk with Ser Jacelyn about men who had been seen taking bribes at a gate and would be dealt with before they had a chance to spend the coins, letters to send, hands to take and let go and take again. He held all of it in his mind, and it did not break him. Beyond the river, horns blew in the lion camp, and men rolled in blankets and dreamed of marrow and women and the sound a man makes when steel goes through him. On the wall of ice, a horn blew twice, and men woke and did not like the way the air felt when it touched their faces. In a city of free towers, 3 small dragons woke and put their heads up and looked at the dark and did not fear it because that is not what they were made for. In the Red Keep, A king's chair sat in a room where no one went at night because the Iron Throne looks different in the dark. It looks like a promise a man made to himself and could not keep. A few ashes lay on the floor near a corner where a woman in red had stood and would not stand again soon. A single mouse ran across the floor and found nothing to eat and ran on. The morning would come. It always did, and men would choose again what to be.